time outside. Let me know if you need anything else.
Whose phone is that?
Are we having some time
Yeah,
outside?
into his federal, he's got his chat, he's doing chat GPT all the time. Now it's turned me into a little English teapot, that gal.
That's great to hear. I'm always here to help. Enjoy your walk.
You guys are dueling it out.
Whoa.
Rick, are you just hanging out with AI? Is this
Basically, got it going on the table and go for dinner.
it does mean
See why Mike wants to say.
We could ask ChatGPT, what would Rick Logtenberg say about this?
right.
So the next time he's not here at the meeting, we can just go with that.
AI, all the
You
way.
probably can actually do that. Right?
Uh-huh, I would think so.
Do we have time? Can we ask him something?
We're live.
Woo! Oh. Gosh, sorry. Well, Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, January the 7th, regular council meeting. Gosh.
You okay, Mayor?
Made me laugh then. Okay, I think I've got it all together. Anyways, welcome back, everybody. 2025 looms ahead of us. So we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal people. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. I've received no requests for late items. If I could have an adoption of the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Pinero. All those in favor? And that carries. We have no minutes. And moving on to, today we have two workshops, educational sessions. And the first one is our community safety officer. I'd like to welcome Silk Edwards, and Chief Donovan Fisher is here to support her. And we're going to listen to how this last year went as the community safety officer. So over to the two of you.
Okay, great. I thought there'd be more of a preamble, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about what my job actually is. Took me a couple months to figure it out, so I'll give it to you in about 10 minutes. Or less, because I talk fast when I'm nervous. So.
Yeah, I said I would interrupt and just slow her down every once in a while, because her presentation is very good and it's been updated, and just I know even from being at some of the council meetings, people here have heard or seen Silk at a number of the community events, and a lot of positive feedback. And even today we had two citizens come in specifically into the office to pass on their compliments and appreciation for the work that she's doing in the community. So it's been a very positive experience and pilot project to this point.
Thank you for that. Guess I can control this now. Yeah, here we go. So these are just some of the things that come up kind of day to day regularly. Civilian and criminal fingerprints, I do both of those. Not many people in the office are trained to do them, so it's helpful. People need to be printed for employment, volunteer, immigration, all sorts of different stuff. So that's one of the jobs I do pretty frequently. Property and graffiti reports, same kind of thing. Just a small job, comes up often. Lost and found property. Graffiti, often there's not much of an investigative follow-up to that. So these kind of files take a lot of time. There's paperwork, but we don't actually need a full officer to investigate them. What do I have on there? I've got foot patrol. That's a big one. I do that pretty much every day. And it's just being like eyes on the ground and a presence in the community. It's a chance for the public to talk to, a member of the department, but not a bit less policey. I hear that comment a lot.
A bit less policey.
And yeah, we have patrol priorities. So citizens will identify areas of interest or where we see more criminal activity. And we focus our patrols on that. So that's something that I spend a lot of time doing, is just going through these hotspot areas, talking to people, seeing what's going on. The property representative database, that was a bigger project when I first started. So basically what it is making sure that for every business in town, we have a contact point with them. So if there's, break and enter, an alarm call, graffiti, something going on after hours, and we need to reach out to the business owner, a lot of our information was quite out of date or non-existent. And so I've just been going door to door, collecting information from business owners.
And I'll just jump in and comment on that as well. I am finding a lot of synergies in what Silk is doing in the community. Like a lot of the stuff is overlapping. So the officer presence downtown, that communication, that bridge between the department, people seem very comfortable with talking to her about some of the concerns they have, and then she's bringing them back to the office and providing those to the shift supervisors or to management, depending on the level of concern. The property representative database has been an excellent program to get in place, and it's been very helpful after hours when police have oftentimes been tied up for hours at an insecure premises or a crime scene trying to contact somebody who can be a property representative, inform them of what's happened, assist them in getting the building secured before we can leave it. So I'm sure there's been several, if not several dozen hours saved in the last couple of months being able to contact people quickly and get those things taken care of. Back to you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have a schedule for updating that, or a planned schedule to maintain the currentness of said list?
That is a good question. It's something I've been working on. I take emails from everyone, and so I have a scheduled email list that will go out to keep that updated once a year.
Great, thanks.
And we've also kind of reminded people, in other interactions, just, if your contacts do change, or if there's new management or something that take over, if they could help us keep that list updated as well and provide us with that information timely rather than waiting for us to come and ask for it.
Great, thanks.
I just maybe follow that up. Just wondering if there's any regulations that we could adopt that would require someone to provide that information. If not, then, that would we be able to charge back for the time that we spent because you haven't made the effort to make sure that we have your contact information, and we have to incur our resources for 2.5 hours because you didn't give us a contact information. Shouldn't be on the police department or the city to provide that service. You as a business owner, and maybe that's part of our business licensing, that we require that that we have current contact information so that that we can contact you, because we have that for fire, we have it for police and others, right?
Do we not have that as part of the business license? Is there not contact information sort of in there?
Yeah, I think we, clearly we collect it from, on the fire side for fire inspections and all that. We must have data on the business licensing, and, if we're doing data here, I think we need to figure out how we, collect it once and make sure it's available. There's, freedom of information, protection of privacy, but we can get people to, allow that to be used by police or fire or others, I think. So, maybe starting that discussion of how we sort of get this data in the most efficient and keep it current in the most efficient manner, because business license you have to do annually, right? So
That would be, I understand what you're saying, and I understand your question, and I know because when I get my business license, and that's when you get yours for the gym, is that information is there, but because of the rules that we have about information and sharing information, I think it might be something as simple as having a tick box on that form that says, I'm willing to have my information shared with the police department for their files, right? So it might become a little bit more difficult when it's a numbered company that's applying for the business license. But those would be things that one would surmount as you went through that process. But I would have no problem with putting a tick beside, yes, my information can be shared with police for their emergency contact database.
And maybe just contact information, not necessarily like financials, I guess.
Oh, yeah, well, there is no financial, that, like, the city doesn't get a financial on the
so-
business thing, but,
Just a phone number.
yeah.
Yeah, phone number and an alternate usually we try. And
Yeah.
I would say, you know, and Sil can comment more than I can on this, but I think it's been very well received and people have been very cooperative and understand. So they've been giving us the information. I like the idea of it being sort of a requirement with the business licenses, but I guess that comes with the fact that then there needs to be some process where that information is available to police, because oftentimes, right now, you may have the information, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, we can't get it. So it would need to be transferred over somehow.
Karen?
I agree, that seems like a very efficient way of keeping it up to date, so I'll follow up with that for sure. What was I talking about?
Just on to subpoenas, I think, is
Oh
the
yeah,
next one.
serving subpoenas. That one's not really interesting. Sometimes you have to serve subpoenas, sometimes it's a pain to track people down, so I do that. The CCTV footage is actually a huge part of my job, more than I expected. But often our officers, you know, they'll be working nights for a couple blocks, they'll be off for a couple blocks, you know, or else they're on days, but they're just really busy. There's a lot of calls. It can be really hard to do follow-up on some of these files. And a big thing with security systems is they'll auto-wipe after a certain amount of time. So some businesses, depending on the computer storage they have, it might be as short as 4 days. So this can be a really time-consuming job and also a really time-sensitive job. So having someone who's, you know, 9 to 5 and can follow up on that, I think has been a big help. You know, sometimes that's as simple as just going to a business, getting video of an event. Sometimes it's going door to door in a whole area, depending on the type of incident we have. And then once we do have footage of an incident, there are certain formats that court can view it in. And so occasionally I'll have to do video conversion, which is another just finicky, tedious little task, but it takes that away from the officers. I've got some stats on here. I was going to put them on a different slide, but anyway. So I don't know if you can see that clearly.
Yeah.
It's some things we've been collecting. So things like the property reference database, property reports that I've done, fingerprints, video canvassing files. We've got numbers on that.
Can you maybe just tell them the numbers on your CSO shift stats?
Sure, I do have that. It's just going to read like a list. It'll be kind of boring. I've done 10 school events since I started, 56 community events, 67 fingerprints, general initiatives. That's just anything that doesn't fit into another box. We stick it in the general initiatives. So I've done 178 of those. Couldn't list what they all were, but I've gotten video for 161 different files. 156 property reports, and added 273 businesses to the database. So I pretty much hit everywhere, thank you, everywhere within walking distance I tried to go. And these are all kind of small things, but like property reports, for example, takes me about 20 minutes to write one, and so I did the math on it. It's about 51 hours that I've spent doing that, and that's just time taken away from an officer who could be out on the streets doing something more important.
And I think with the, you know, things like the video surveillance collection and that, Silk has gotten very efficient at, you know, she knows the process, the continuity issues that we have to account for, processing it, saving it, converting it when that's needed, and then having it ready for the officer. So, you know, there's hundreds of little things, but all those little things add up into hundreds of hours of saved time that officers are not tied up with doing, all while still being out and walking to all these places and being visible in the community and having lots of conversations with people to and from all these places. So there's a lot of spin-off benefits from it as well.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into my community engagement slide. And this is really what the CSO position is all about. We're a really small department. We have a high call volume. On a busy day, officers are responding to calls, call to call to call. On a slightly less busy day, they're catching up on paperwork from the busy days. And so my position, I'm able to be out in the community, talking to people, finding out what people's perceived problems are and, how we can approach that proactively. So yeah, I do that. I'm out on foot every day. I've met many of you out doing that. I try and walk everywhere I go. And, connecting with business owners has been a big one. The property reference database was one way that I did that. I talked to lots of people with the CCTV. Recently, I've been working with our victim services department on a break and enter project. So that's sort of a proactive approach to B&Es. We've put together a package of, tips and proactive measures that businesses can take, as well as contact information for different services in town. And we've been delivering that door to door to businesses in town.
Mayor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Through the chair. I'm just wondering about, as you're out there, and I think like having that visibility and having you out, I think it's, for me, seeing you out there is just wonderful because it means that your eyes and ears and you're out there a lot. But I'm wondering, how do you draw the line between what you can actually tackle as a CSO and when you have to call in an officer? Because there must be this kind of gradient of risk.
Yeah,
I
that's a
suppose.
good question. So in my position, I have no enforcement powers.
Mm-hmm.
I do not ticket or arrest anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I can take an educational role, so I'll occasionally, warn people.
Mm-hmm.
If I get non-compliance with something, then I don't push it at all.
Right.
I would call in an officer. I haven't found.
Sorry, do you want to mention your unarmed peacekeeper training you took as well? I think that falls into that role.
It does. Yeah, so a big part of it, because I'm not enforcement, I focus on conflict de-escalation and just talking with people. So to that end, in the spring and May, I took what was the course called? Nonviolent civilian. There's a whole acronym and I'm forgetting it, but I took that course through Selkirk College. And that had a lot of really valuable information for just communication and de-escalation.
Because I would imagine, sorry, Mayor, may I? Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would imagine you need to protect yourself in situations, and so you must be kind of jostling that in your brain, has this gone too far, or I have to pull back, or I got to call an officer? But that must be kind of a thing that you work with while you're out there, right?
I suppose so. I do carry use of force tools with me. I don't have a taser or a gun. For me, the biggest thing is the radio. I feel pretty comfortable always having communication with the officers. Because we're a small town, we have really good response time. If there was a serious situation, I feel confident that someone would help me. And I haven't had a situation come up where I've felt unsafe or threatened on the job. I think people understand that my role is not enforcement. I'm here for every member of the community, and most people are comfortable talking and receptive to what I have to say.
And just to add on to that, I think, you've mentioned it, but we've got pretty good monitoring between the dispatchers and the other officers, and they know when Charlie 1 is out and about and doing her thing and where she's kind of going throughout the day. So there's a good awareness of where she is, but also compliment her, and I think it's one of the strong points of the program is the fact that she's out and about every day, is she's developed a lot of relationships with people out in the community, and she stops and talks to the members of the vulnerable population, and is, I guess, has that rapport with people before there's a serious situation. And I think she's done a good job at gauging where, we generally know when there's something escalating, and SOCA's been good at kind of giving us the heads up if it looks like something is starting to escalate, so officers can start making their way there while she can start the de-escalation process of talking to people. And lots of times by the time the officers get there, they can read the situation pretty fast too, and sometimes there's, they just hang back and let it be dealt with, and if they need to come up and sort of support her and I guess help de-escalate the situation, that's happened a couple of times, I think, but it's we've never had a situation where anything's developed anything that was serious or of concern.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, where did I leave off? What else do I do community engagement wise? Media
think,
releases. As you know, I was supposed to be here last month and I wasn't because I was trapped in Vancouver. And I was in Vancouver to be trained with the Vancouver Police Media Department. So I've been writing for the last several months a weekly media release, thanks to one member of the community who kept asking me to do it. And then when we have a more major call, I'll often write the media release for that. And, these serve the dual purpose of public information and helping us. Sometimes we're requesting information or help from the public. And I think they're a good way to make the public aware of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people don't really know, and it just fosters community engagement and discussion. So I really enjoy that.
And I'll comment again, I'm happy with that because that's something I've been trying to get going since I got here, is more regular updates and media releases just on the general stuff the department's doing. So we've made sort of leaps and bounds forward on having a regular update and some good awareness of what's happening. And Silk mentioned this, but even myself a few times now, I've come across things that I think there needs to be a media release on or public awareness, and I can just type out something like bullet form really quick or whatever and send it to her and say, can you put together a media release on this? So it's very helpful.
Yeah, and really all of it comes down to building rapport with people. It makes my job way easier when I have a relationship with people, and same with the officers. And it's about building trust between the community and our department. Yeah, community events, that's another big part of the job. Anytime there's a gathering of people, I try and be there. The Wednesday and Saturday markets were a big one in the summer and fall. That's grad cavalcade. It was raining as usual. So yeah, I was doing traffic control for that. I did the same thing for the Nelson Pride Parade. Same thing on a very small scale for the Nelson Fat Tire Fest, which was about 50 little kids on bikes. That was a fun one. We had Canada Day, we had the Road Kings night markets, just big events, lots of people. And because my role is not enforcement, but just education, usually it's really like a good time. I have a lot of fun with these events. I get to interact with the community, and again, it gives members of the community a chance to interact with a member of law enforcement in a non-stressful setting. Most of the time when you're talking with the police, it's because something bad has happened, and I think it's good to be able to build up these relationships before that, without that stress. And at these events, I'm providing a visible police presence, so maybe that makes people think. And if something does happen, I'm there to call it in and help us respond more efficiently.
And with the help on the traffic and crowd control piece too, case in point, Remembrance Day, it between that and our reservists, it frees up some more officers to participate in Remembrance Day itself. So I think it was nice we had a pretty good turnout this year, and Silk was one of the reasons for that.
Yeah, so education has been a big part of this job and something I really like. I've had a couple different things. The pictures up here are from some of our bicycle safety events. That was a big focus in May, June, end of the school year. Went to schools, talked to kids about the rules of the road, trying to curb the e-bike teenager menace. Don't know how successful we were on that.
I'm going to apologize to the community for my children.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I went to some of the youth summer camps, gave the same kind of bicycle safety speech. I've had some businesses ask me to talk about interacting with the unhoused population and some of the rules and regulations around things like panhandling. Over the summer, myself and one of the officers gave a presentation to the senior center about fraud and common scams. That's something I've been trying to focus on with the media releases too, because we're seeing tons of them, and they're getting better and better. Just recently, Bigby Place invited me to come in and just hold like a Q&A session about public safety. So that was cool. And then we had the Youth Police Academy this November, which I'll talk about a bit more because I'm excited about it. It was a bigger project. Yeah, so this was a class that I put together in November. We had 12 students. I had to cap it there because that was as much as I felt I could deal with, but we had more people who applied. It ran over the course of 4 Saturdays, and our only requirement was just being within the age group, 12 to 17, and having some sort of interest in law enforcement. So we got a huge range of students, which was really cool. And, we covered a range of topics, taking fingerprints, talking on the radio. We did a bit of use of force. We did a lot of conflict de-escalation. We did some forensics. We had a member from the RCMP forensics department come in and teach about identifying fingerprints. That was really neat. Covered a lot of stuff, and it was just a great event. I felt like it was a really good way to, again, the relationship building piece with these young people. I've had, excuse me, parents and students from that event have reached out to me since. Oh, I don't usually talk this much.
Can I just add one thing before your question? The other thing that I found really cool about it was that, so having that relationship with the officers too, convinced officers to come in and participate in this, and they all spoke on different topics and different things, and I saw a lot of enthusiasm for that, and some of them are asking already, like, when are we going to do this again? So it was good for the department too, I think.
Pass forward.
Thank you. Do you think that possibly that, this might be an avenue for people to actually become police officers at some point? What was the age bracket? Was 12 to
12 to 17, so a little bit young, but certainly good experience. And
Right.
a couple students I definitely have my eye on. I'm like, you're going to be a cop.
Right. So that do you feel like that's, because I know that, like, we've talked about that before, but that it's challenging now with policing and getting younger police officers. And so I guess this is a good avenue
I
maybe
think
towards that, or
it builds
people...
interest, and a lot of people aren't super familiar with what police actually do. So I think it was a good way for the students who participated to see a real look into our department and how we operate, and what some of the different career avenues within policing are, because we had this range of officers who came in and spoke about the things they've done and the things that they currently do.
That's great.
And again, I think that familiarity that, the kids were comfortable talking to the officers and asking questions, and now they're going to see them out in the public, and not necessarily from this, but from some other youth things I've been involved in. You'll be driving, doing the school zones or something in the morning, and one of the kids will call out and come over, and they bring all their friends over to talk to you too, and all of a sudden you're talking to 10 kids on the side of the road, and it's just getting through that door sometimes. So I think it's really important for that respect.
Bridge building.
Yeah.
Essentially. Okay, thank you.
And I really hope this is something that we can expand on in future years. I've got a lot of ideas for how I could improve it. It was definitely a project I was quite excited about.
And I think going forward, with the interest from this, and I think the word of mouth that's gotten out on it now, there's even more interest that, we could easily run this 2, 3, and depending on your workload, 4 times a year, but.
Well, depending on the officer workload as well. I don't want to pester people too much.
They're not busy.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's basically it. As I see it, there's basically 2 prongs to my position. The one is community engagement and getting out into the public, talking to people, listening to people's concerns, and finding out what proactive steps we can be taking as a department. The job is sort of a bridge, I think, between our department and the public. And I've heard a lot of people say that they're just happy to talk to someone less policey. And, problems that they don't feel are big enough to take to the police department, but still something that we can address. And then the second prong I see is the follow-up work and the administrative tasks and taking work off of the officers' plates. So, the property, CCTV, fingerprints, all of these things that don't actually require a full officer but do take up a lot of time. And so that way we can keep our officers where we actually need them, which is on the streets and responding to calls. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm from Nelson, I grew up here, so I'm invested in seeing the community do well. And I think this is, part of the model of community policing. And I think that's what makes our department strong.
Thank you so much. So, councillors, do you have any further questions for Councillor Payne?
I just have one further question. I'm just curious. I know you walk everywhere and I see you out there. What is sort of your range?
It depends. Walking distance. If I'm going to Fairview, I'll usually drive, but otherwise I'll walk.
So you'd sort of be like 80% focused on the downtown core from...
Yeah, the majority of the time I spend on the downtown core, just because that's where we see most of our calls. I don't really go into residential areas. There's not really much proactive work to be done there. I focus a lot on our priority areas and then things like parks.
Yeah, and I'm presuming that does shift in the summertime when there's more down around lakefront. Yep, awesome. Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Silk, thanks for that, and thanks for all of your great work. This was helpful for me to understand more about what the job is and how you're serving in that role. One question I had was related to how you interface with street outreach or some of the social service groups. And I know the chief does, and many of the officers have connections, but within the unhoused population, there are maybe some individuals who we know more and who we have more contact with. Are you in the loop with all of that, given that you're on the street so much, or is that not really within your domain?
Yeah, I definitely talk to street outreach.
Okay.
It really depends on the situation. There's certain things that police have authority to do and things that they don't, right? And so sometimes a person will be in distress, but it's not really an appropriate call for police. So then that's a call for street outreach or for Nelson Mental Health or, stepping stones, other services that we have in town. So yes, there's communication between my role and those other services.
Okay.
And I think they cross paths fairly regularly, but also back to with the radio and that, oftentimes she can get a hold of dispatch if we need the person who's, focused more on the mental health aspect or outreach or some other crisis that, again, doesn't necessarily need police intervention, but the person needs help. Mm-hmm. Through dispatch, we can also have them call and reach out and report that or ask those, that agency to send somebody down to assist. So again, being out there is often the one that's coming across some of that stuff in its early stages and recognizing it and getting the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm. Follow up?
Sure.
Just so one of the things we've heard from the social services community is they feel that there's a gap in some coordination between the city, the social services organizations, and I'm just trying to understand what role you're already playing within that context. I know it's obviously you're not going to be writing grants or doing anything like that, but is there any overlap in your mind between the work you're doing and just bridging between different groups? Like if, for example, if you see something and you know of a persistent issue with a certain community member or something, like how, and maybe there's a program that person should know about, or there seems to me like part of the challenge we have in dealing with this emerging and ongoing and emerging crisis is a bit about coordination, and it seems to me that coordination should be happening at multiple levels, even within a given situation, like, oh, this, rather than call street outreach, who are then going to call that group, who are then going to refer to that group, maybe you just straight line it to, oh, this needs to go directly to IH or to, it's a medical issue. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just, because if this is going to come to us as a budget ask and additional work, I just want to understand what that overlap might be with your work and with these other asks.
Yes, I mean, certainly I'll try and, refer someone to the appropriate service or assess the situation as best I can and, call in another agency if that's appropriate. I'm not really sure.
So what I'm hearing then is you're quite responsive, and that's fine. Like if something happens, you see it, you react to it, and your ability to be on the street and be in this role over time just makes you better at that. But you're not necessarily taking a proactive role in the same way that you're taking a proactive role with some other community work you're doing with youth and others. But you're not really taking a proactive role in identifying a program or identifying a potential initiative to undertake with respect to that community. That's not you don't see that as your domain. That would be happening somewhere else.
No, and I don't see that as her domain either.
Yeah,
Like,
okay.
she's certainly eyes and ears on the ground, and oftentimes, can make that assessment at the time whether this is crisis situation where somebody needs to respond to it now, and her role would be to report that back to the department, and we could forward that or send an officer down to assess it as well. But I also think there's the opportunity there with, her being out pretty much every day and seeing those people or situations that wouldn't be classified as a crisis, but definitely needing some attention, or that gradual decline where, hey, we should probably do something here before it becomes a crisis. And I think that's where the value is in her being out there. And I've got a meeting coming up, and I'm sorry, I'm sitting here trying to think of the appropriate title for it, but it's basically a table where all the agencies are at, and there's been different iterations of this over the last while, but I'm hopeful that we're getting started where all the agencies that can help, and maybe it's multiple agencies helping somebody, whether it's addictions, housing, mental health, are all in the same room together, can discuss specific people and situations and decide, okay, what are the priority needs for this person? Who should be the lead agency taking this on? But that doesn't absolve the other agencies from doing their part as well. But it's just, this is the priority today, and until we get this issue fixed, we can't deal with the other issues. So that's something I see coming here in the new year. And like I said, I've got a meeting in January with some of the stakeholders of that, and I've seen that in other communities. So again, I can see the role in the CSO being a support of that, but not being the tool or having the tools that are going to deal with the situation, but certainly are there to identify the situation and hopefully identify it earlier than like I said before, it's a crisis situation.
Yeah, okay. That's helpful. Thanks.
Councilors, any other questions?
Oh, yes. Thanks. Thank you so much. I like your presentation. It was different than the one we had, so you're going to send the newer one so it can be attached. Yeah, it was slightly different. So this was a full-time job for how many months now?
I think about 8 months now.
Eight
I
months?
started April 29th, so basically beginning of May.
Nice, good. And you've had some training and that sort of thing. One of the reasons why the table was so excited about it was to free up some time for police officers. And of course, we know that we have asks in the budget for additional officers. And of course, a CSO is less expensive than an officer and all these things. So when we're looking at the big picture, is this 8 months? Is it working, Chief?
Yes,
Is it doing that?
I definitely think it's helping, especially right now with the call volume and stuff the officers have. It's, again, to Silk's point, like a lot of times during the shifts, during the day, they're running and having priority calls to go to rather than doing some of these follow-up tasks that need to be done, or they're on night shifts for sometimes a couple of blocks in a row because of shortages and that. So it certainly takes the pressure off the officers on some of these lower priority type tasks, but essential tasks nonetheless.
Yeah.
Some of the consistency that we're seeing now with the processing, collecting, evidence, picking up statements, picking up the CCTV footage, documenting the graffiti and things like that, I think has been very valuable as well. I think that's a consistent and regular contact point for members of the community, in particular the businesses, where we've been trying to, I think there's always been good rapport there. So I don't think it's been necessarily mending that per se, but I think it's definitely improved it, and the fact that they have somebody who's down and there regularly and has, I would say, demonstrated that when they do have concerns or things are being raised, that it's actually getting back to the office, and we're having the ability to know about things sooner than again, talking about crises. Sometimes people don't necessarily report things, and I like the term less policey, but they sometimes are worried about reporting things and bothering the department. So I think there's things that we're hearing and finding out, and it's getting fed back to us sooner than it would be if she wasn't out there in the community. So again, at times there's things that, right at that point in time we can't necessarily do something about, but there's other times where I think we can be a little bit more preemptive on dealing with something before it becomes a bigger issue.
It sounds like the CSO job description is flexible and evolving at this time. I'm curious, if we had a more robust CSO program, would there be less need for more and more officers?
I think there would be at some stage in the future. I don't want to sound like I've got a different agenda, but I do see, once we have sort of those basic requirements for enough officers to cover the shifts off and be able to respond to calls and be able to cover sort of short-term absences, holidays, trainings, and things like that, I do see realistically that the CSO program could be expanded going forward and reduce the need for additional officers, because there is a lot of administrative tasks. There's a lot of these follow-up type tasks that the CSO is doing for us and making an impact on what the officers are tied up for. And I would say in a lot of cases probably preserving evidence, because again, the timeliness or the time-sensitive nature of a lot of the evidence we collect and the security camera footage and things like that, that if you don't get there within that time period, it's lost. So I see it as being an augmentation to the role of the officers, but a very important one at the same time. And I do see, again, going forward, that once we kind of have a basic sort of benchmark or that basic level of officer staffing in the department, that I think going forward we should look at opportunities to use the CSO program more and more.
Gotcha.
Councillor Pinero before Councillor Wood.
Thanks. I can't help but, I might be wrong about this, but a lot of what you do seems to, like the, community engagement and relationship building and presence, just a presence downtown and around. A lot of that seems to be what a traditional beat cop would be doing, basically. I mean, obviously there's one of the reasons for this program was be cost effective, and obviously it's much more cost effective to have you do those things than a full police officer. But I guess I'm wondering if we did have a beat cop before, are these two, do we have a beat cop and Silk at the same time for the last 8 months, and have they been those two jobs seem to replicate one another a bit, Is this sort of a replacement for that, or does it just augment in your view, or some combination of the two?
Yeah, I think it augments it. I don't think one can replace the other. The beat officer has more of an enforcement role downtown. Now, obviously, there's certainly the same benefits of being visible and having that communication with the businesses, et cetera. But I would also say that when the beat officers downtown, especially over the summer months and stuff when it's busy downtown, I don't want them in a business for half an hour talking and visiting. Now, again, there's benefits to them popping in and out as they have time throughout the day, but really their core function is out on the street, monitoring for activity that's detrimental to the community and detrimental to the tourist industry, detrimental to the businesses, and taking enforcement action. Whereas I see the CSO back more on that community side of things, where she's engaging, building those bridges, talking to the businesses and finding out information. She has the time to go down there and follow up on all those tasks that the officers have left from night shift or the previous day shift they didn't get to, and collect the evidence. Now, again, the beat officer can and has traditionally done some of that as well, but then, again, they're going back to the office to process that. So essentially, her role is also helping keep that beat officer down there and engaged in their role of public safety and protection.
Councilor Woodward.
Just a straightforward question. Do you see CSOs graduating to officers? Like, would this be a kind of training for Nelson police officers?
Do you want to take that one?
Oh,
I'm just putting her on the spot because she was asking on the way in when we were going to have another recruit class. So
Yes.
she's doing such a good job, I'm not going to let her, but
I was gonna say, don't be putting ideas in
Just
her
say
head,
no.
Councilor
Yeah.
Woodward, please.
But
did such a good job, I'm not going to give you a choice. I think many of the skills are very transferable. I do a lot of writing reports, things like that. I have a relationship with many members of the community, so I think it would be transferable. It is a different role, though. You know, I don't have the enforcement role, and so I think I'll just speak for the department since you put me on the spot here. I think it would be valuable as a way for the department to gauge someone's character and skills and provide them training before sending them off to cop school, if that was the avenue they're going to take. I also could see this being a job that, you know, is totally separate from policing and doesn't graduate to that.
Right.
So
Like certain people might move to become an officer, but some people might actually just like that role,
yeah.
CSO role.
yeah, and my comment on it, and without getting into my whole philosophy on policing, but I honestly believe policing is a customer service job. And, you know, when people talk to me about what do they need to do to become a police officer, a lot of times I tell them, like, get a job in the service industry, get a job at a store, get a job, because, you know, reality is if you can work in those places and you can talk to people and you can deal with unhappy customers, like, essentially that's what we're dealing with. Unhappy customers, maybe at a higher level, but that's what it is. And I really see the CSO job as that sort of, you know, I don't know if saying an audition for a police job is the right term, but, you know, we hire right now, our last couple officers have come out of our dispatch center. So I think those, you know, those jobs, you can really see how somebody relates to people, how they communicate with people, how they deal with people in stressful situations, how they handle conflict, how they handle, you know, people who are upset or angry. And truly, that's 90% of police work. So, you know, if you can do that role, you know, regardless of whether you're serving tables, helping customers at a store, being the CSO, being the dispatch, and helping people on the phone who are in distress in the front counter, I think that's a very good metric to judge who we hire. So I definitely see that as a point. I hope there's people that will come into the CSO role that, you know, like it for what it is and want to make it long term. But I also see the benefits of, you know, these are people that have demonstrated that ability and already have that rapport with the community and have a bit of that function. It's an asset to us to send them to training then, and they come back, you know, way ahead of what I would say most officers have when they start at a new police department.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? One thing you haven't talked about is the relationship with Bylaw. Bylaw are obviously working with the homeless population in terms of, you know, where they're sleeping or, you know, I know they go visit them daily. So how does that role, and how does policing also, I guess, work with Bylaw in terms of that public, or the safety of our employees?
Take that one. Yeah, they're definitely another agency that we contact. We have different roles. They have certain enforcement powers for some things that police don't, and vice versa. I have no enforcement powers for anything.
They're educating, they're working with people.
Yeah,
you know,
we
for
serve
services
similar
and-
functions.
Yeah.
We have contact frequently. I don't work directly with them,
But I also think they're educating people a bit on different avenues, like there's similar role, but different context. So, you know, no doubt there's overlap, and there's overlap between what the police and the CSO and what bylaw all do. But everybody has their sort of core function and specialty areas. And I think that I see bylaw as a little bit more of an enforcement arm. You know, much like the police, we prefer to do the education piece first and explain to people why what they're doing isn't acceptable and maybe suggest some alternatives or the consequences of continuing. Bylaw kind of falls into that same role where we try to keep the CSO role away from that, you know, consequences piece. If it's getting to that stage, then the CSO kind of disengages and keeps that positive community rapport building position, and an officer will step in and take over at that point. Or if appropriate, depending what the situation is, maybe a bylaw steps in and takes over at that point.
So do you see that as a team approach to, the challenges that public safety challenges
I would say so. I think, Bylaw is one of many agencies. We're working with street outreach, we're working with mental health, we're working with a number of partner agencies all around the same issues, but with different aspects of them.
And do you see we actually take a collective approach or I think it's different than handing off to an agency. And maybe that's what you were talking about, Chief, of this other table, but it seems to me there's a chance to take a collective approach, street outreach, bylaw, CSO, policing, and others, I guess.
And I think it should naturally become that. I mean, you do kind of hand off the bigger chunk of what the problem is to whoever has that specialty. But again, it doesn't absolve everybody else from doing their part or walking away from the situation. And again, the CSO is still going to be out on the street and having interactions with that person, regardless of whether mental health and addictions are helping them, or Nelson Cares, or they're going to the food bank, or whatever the situation might be. The CSO still has a bit of that ability to take the temperature of the situation, and if it doesn't seem like it's helping or it's still getting worse, that they can give that feedback. But again, I would say more her role to recognize and report on the situation, where then it can be properly handed off to the who can actually address the situation.
So, seeing no further questions, and that I'm always conscious of the time, so you have very little time, city manager, to do your next report. But it's important, and I want to thank you, Silk, for coming. I was really excited when you did this presentation to the police board, and I was like, you need to be coming to city council. We need to hear what you're doing, and it's taken a while, but you've come now, and I think that the work you've been doing is great. I hear lots of positive feedback from the business community. I've talked to a couple of the young people that went to the police academy, and they have nothing but great things to say about that. So I'm sure that they're spreading the word at school about their experience there. So all I would just like to say is, keep up the good work. I enjoy seeing you around town at everything. I turn around and there's Silk. So it's great to see you at so many activities around town, and you've become a visible face that people recognize. So 2 jobs that you can have. One, you can't run to be the mayor. That's my job. And the second job is, no, you can't go and become a police officer in the next round of recruitment, because we like you as the CSO. And thank you, Chief, for bringing up the fact that we have had, anytime that you're involved with any kind of agency, I think it's the idea is that if you get exposure to something, you might be interested in that career. Just like we talk about, let's train healthcare professionals in a rural setting, they're liable to come and work in a rural setting. I think that we've seen with the success of the couple that have come from our dispatch team that have gone through the Justice Institute to become officers, that once you're in that milieu, that often you realize, hey, this kind of fits with me. So I would see a strong CSO program, definitely graduating some people onto a policing level, but not right now.
Order from the mayor.
Yeah.
Or Mary, but she's out there at everything. She's out there at absolutely everything. So thanks again for your presentation this evening. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
okay, and next up we have Kevin is gonna city manager's gonna do a strategic plan review. So he's gonna have a little seat at the other end of the table there. And sorry, I know that you've only got now half an hour to. I imagine that you don't have a verbal report after this. I could probably take off item 7,
Yes,
but
yes, we can.
but councilors might have a few reports. We'll just see how it goes. And just a reminder to everybody that as we go through the budget process for our every Friday in January, that the strategic plan will be referenced all during our budget discussions. So this is just to sort of give us an update as to where we are as we go into this process of the budget 2025 discussions. So over to you, Kevin.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Council. As the Mayor stated, going into the budget sessions, we felt it was important that we give you an update of where we're at with our strategic plan. Hopefully everyone had a look at the actual strategic plan before this presentation. When I went through it and ticked off the items that we are either working on or have completed, I think we're doing really well in terms of delivering on the priorities that Council had established, I guess almost, probably 18 months ago now. So, and this is really a bit of a snapshot of where we're at, and, talking to Chris Johnson, this is, each one of these items we could spend a lot of time on exactly what we've, the depth of each one of these. So this is more of a snapshot of those. So is it down arrows or up arrows or enter? Pardon?
Go to the right-hand bottom. You don't even need to touch it's on the keypad.
Yeah.
Right-hand side. Arrow that goes to the right.
Yeah, doesn't seem to do anything.
That's me.
Yeah, this isn't responding. I guess you'll have to. Yeah. All right, so the next one. Yeah. All right, so really Council set these broad goals in these 5 areas. The first one is a healthy built-in and natural environment. A lot of this is around the work we're doing around Nelson Next. Some of the highlights of where we're at is we're in the process of finalizing a grant and loan program to to expand the home energy retrofit program and be able to do more deep energy retrofits. I don't think that should get held up by the federal government. I think we're past that stage. So that is a long program that we've had here there in the city, and it's expanded regionally. I think the uptake is still pretty good. I think it goes up and down depending on what rebates are available through the Fortis and others, and the province and the feds. So again, you'll get in more depth with each of these when those departments present. On the embodied carbon work, again, we're still doing work in this area. We did get the grant extended by Fortis to fund that program. I think everyone's aware that Nelson received an award at the UBCM around the work we've done, and we're starting to see uptake in the community and the building community around that. Probably the larger project that we're doing around energy upgrades and reducing GHG is the Civic Center project that was originally funded primarily as a energy efficiency and GHG project. As everyone's aware, we had the challenges with the roof, so we had to pivot a bit and do that work in that area. However, we are upgrading windows, we are adding insulation, we are doing some fuel switching there and receiving some fairly significant energy and GHG savings there. Fleet decarbonization, again, council's aware that one of our Nelson Next teams, our climate team, Graham presented a path forward. There's kind of different levels of investment that council can look at making. That is part of the budget discussions that are upcoming around that. Again, we were able to get that grant extended to for that position. We have hired someone new into that position. He's been fantastic and did all the modeling work for us when we're looking at the different options around the Civic Center in meeting those targets. Organics diversion, still a lot of effort in that area. Council's recently extended that pilot into 2025, and a decision on the best way forward will be made this fall. Low carbon transportation, again, number of things ongoing. The Eat Bike program still is popular and has good uptake. Everyone's aware of the Transit Exchange. That's been tendered now, and construction is scheduled for this spring. The climate team received a large grant of, I think, about $30,000 for this reducing barriers to cycling in Nelson. That was a good awareness and program that went out. And then the extension of the multi-use pathway along the Lakeside Drive there. That's probably the more infrastructure one that's been done. I don't know if anybody's been on that, but the paving and widening of that and reducing the road width and traffic through there. Around the natural environment, again, we were able to secure a student through SFU to do this urban forestry scoping and natural asset inventory with a number of recommendations that was presented to council, and I'm sure Natalie's group will give an update of where we're at with that. We will create some additional park space with a Trevor Street land swap. So we'll formalize some park space up there, and it will be a natural space. Oh, thanks. And a couple others that Natalie's department, or the Development Service Department, identified was the Anderson Creek detailed hazard mapping work is underway, and that will be completed in 2025. And they're also looking at a risk tolerance policy to be developed, which will help inform land use planning as well. Again, we continue to work with Safe BC and others on wildlife conflict, changed out a number of our bear bins, and again, a budget decision in 2025 will be, do we extend that into the downtown? And council asked us to look at the Kootenai Conservative Program membership, and again, you'll see that as part of the discussions in 2025 budget. And just a couple smaller ones, the next slide, I guess. Oh, nope, go back one. It's all on one slide on this one. Yeah,
question,
and just
Councillor Tate?
some improvements in Lakeside Park that we noted around here. Yes.
Through the chair, I think we're working on, it's in progress, the Parks Master Plan. It's not on this list, so
Yeah, I don't-
thought that was in progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a win.
Yeah, that's
Off
correct.
the ground.
Yeah, it's off the ground, and it's of course focusing on the cemetery
Right.
initially,
Yeah.
and then we'll be moving in with the second phase. We'll see how this one goes with the first phase. But.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and if you look at your actual strategic plan, there's a couple areas that we really haven't made a ton of progress on. Working with Anderson Creek Timber, that's kind of gone a bit quiet. So we had done a fair amount of work. I think there's been some change in their management team over there. Implementing an invasive species reduction strategy. I don't know if that's really got traction, or Chris, do you want to maybe give an update on that one?
Well, we're certainly still, and I think it's even in the reports, the financial reports that we did pay to CKIS, so Central Kootenai Invasive Species Society. And, that's kind of the model, is they really do sort of lead the charge on those efforts. So it's a matter of level of investment looking at there. So we do have an ongoing invasive species, and it's, probably a question for perhaps later in council's term of where the city wants to land on level of investment for invasive species.
Okay, any questions in this area? Like I said, I think we've made some pretty good progress. We're, I would say we've relied pretty significantly on grants to advance our work in this area, and specifically with our climate team and investments in facilities and other things. So we're pretty grant dependent at this stage on that. So I would say that's the risk going forward.
Just don't want to forget that on here is completed the bocce ball courts at Lakeside and the basketball courts, which were a really nice addition.
Councillor Walkenberg has a question.
So one of the things that I think is maybe missing in this update, or maybe is missing in our approach to certainly a healthy built and natural environment, is the role for the city in enabling the community to lead on these files. So these are city-led initiatives, and I think that's important, and I thank you for it. But what I would like to see us more and more exploring, if not actively communicating out to the community, is that the city's role in a lot of our in our future, in terms of building a healthier community, one that's more in harmony with our natural environment, a lot of that work and that initiative is going to come from the community. It's not centered in City Hall, but City Hall does have a role to play in really saying yes by default, I would say, to initiatives that are brought forward by the community. So, and because that's, I think, where maybe our biggest value to the community can be, which is it getting out of the way. And so I just want to flag that, because I think it's difficult, especially in the natural environment question. What can the city do? And if people are constantly looking to the city because the city's got a posture of we lead on everything in terms of community development and everything, then people just lose initiative. And I think we've had a few examples that have come before us in which a community group has had initiative, and we just haven't been either responsive, or we haven't sort of leaned into that notion of yes by default. And how can we support you? Even though it's going to cost us time, the return on that time, so 10 hours of staff time can turn into 1,000 hours of community time on those initiatives. So I just want to really, once again, say how much many of these things are going to come from the community, and we need to develop a posture of saying yes and supporting them whenever we can.
Yeah, no, that's that's definitely fair. The city cannot, where we set policy, we set direction we, hopefully in many ways enable. I think you'll see that with the OCP of, the many goals, et cetera, but, the city of Nelson does not have the capacity or, it takes the community to actually do those things. If you want, 4 units built on a lot, then we're not building 4 units on a lot. That's up to the community. If you want, all those things, we set that sort of policy framework, and hopefully you see people pick up, and embrace those things. So we'll definitely note that. All right, community is diverse and connected, and this really is primarily around sort of how our community builds out and how we get around in our community, et cetera. And I think, we're doing extremely well in this area when we look at the, and I think this is a good example of where the community has stepped up. The housing projects, et cetera, that are being brought forward are not the City of Nelson led. We have a role to allow those type of projects, support those in ways of in our policy work, et cetera. So, we were very quick to be able to, because we were proactive already in how, how our single family lots developed by having laneway houses and allowing suites in all our single family dwellings beforehand. So our, adoption of the new rules wasn't a big leap for us. We're ready there. And I think that's a good example of how, council can, set direction and through policy, and the community picks them up. I think the stats are, new single family dwellings. I think it's like 80% are built with suites, and that's, they don't, someone doesn't have to build a suite, but they choose to build a suite because I think we're suite friendly, and we work on that. So again, we're really quick to be able to, to make those changes. Again, I understand the first in the province to complete a housing needs assessment under the new provincial regulations. We were able to implement the priority recommendations in the non-market housing strategy. That was supporting our nonprofits, that we have strong nonprofits that are in a position to, make applications, get those projects forward and do that hard work. And, talking to other communities, they just don't have that. And I think Macola identified that as well. This is kind of unique to Nelson. And, again, how do we facilitate that? We identified surplus lands that could be available for this type of housing. So that's that sort of community, city, working together. Supported housing applications, they're going through their processes, but they could add up to 150 plus new units in Nelson in that affordable and deeply subsidized areas. We did apply under the Housing Accelerator program. That one I'm a little concerned that with the federal government situation that will be dead in its tracks unless it's gone from past the that level. So that one's obviously concerning. Whether any announcements were supposed to be in November, we're now into January and we haven't heard anything, and now the the house is not the government's prorogued, and so so that's a concern. In terms of our neighborhoods, again, from that policy point of view, the OCP really sets that direction. That was again, led by the city, but significant community input in policies, and all those policies will need, community to pick up and run with. Transit exchange we mentioned, so that's will be hopefully start this spring, and we'll have a new transit exchange, modern transit exchange hopefully by fall next year or even the summer. As you know, we took on, council approved us taking on Kootenay Lake West. That's been very positive in terms of rebuilding that trust in transit, and especially in that rural area where there was, it just was so unreliable. Actively participating in the Selkirk College Bridging Rural Homelessness. They are looking at a phase 2 with that. They've asked us to participate and provide some level of funding. And then supporting the social sector. Again, council supported our nonprofits by allowing this, these temporary housing units at the North Shore Inn, while 2 other permanent supportive housing projects will get developed in the next couple of years. So that adds another 70 units plus of housing. And again, the last point there was the Emergency Treatment Fund, again, federal program. Likely that's probably dead in the waters as well. So, and, interesting enough, looking at sort of where we are in based on the Nelson or the housing assessment, if all these projects go ahead, it looks to me, well, it's not just these projects. There's 75 long-term care beds. There's 35 student housing. There's 120 assisted living units being built. So if all those things go ahead, we're doing really well in the affordable and below market housing area. On the surface, it looks like we meet the 5-year demand that was identified. Not in every category. There's obviously 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom units that were not necessarily meeting the demand in those areas, but we're doing really well. The deeply affordable units with the 70 supportive housing units, each of those affordable housing units have 20% have to be deeply subsidized. So again, in that area, it looks like we're exceeding what was identified in the housing report for those units. And it's really on the private sector side, but with the 120 assisted living, those are obviously market housing units, and we had almost 60 housing starts between 28 rental suites, 24 in multi-unit buildings, and the rest single family, with some of those suites would have been in those same projects. So we had about 60 new units this year. So again, we seem to be doing quite well in our on that housing side of it.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, I would, that's all really great information, and I'm wondering if I could just request that even a Facebook post of those numbers, because I know people probably understand that this is happening over there and this is happening, but when you put it all together over a span of last couple of years, because I know that the community really called out to us to make some big moves, and I think we have. And so it would be really great if that those hard data numbers would just be put in a very bullet point piece of communication.
Yeah, it was super interesting, getting some information from our development services staff, the information that was provided in the housing needs report, and starting to, kind of tie the two things together. And so I have just sent that to our development services staff to make sure that, where do we categorize these? I took my best guess on where those sorts of things would look like. I don't know how the housing study was done in terms of identifying, where does, market assisted living fit? I assume it's in the market.
Just so the community knows that we are answering that call and we're doing the best that we can, and actually it's producing quite a good result. Thank you.
Can I just jump in with one other thing?
Sure, Councilor Payne.
Yeah, I think the other thing that is part of that picture is the fact that by providing more affordable and subsidized housing for seniors, we will free up currently overhoused 3- and 4-bedroom market housing that isn't necessarily calculated into the housing needs assessment, but I think it is a critical component because those are often the doctors and the nurses and the professionals coming in. We don't have to build everything.
Yeah.
We just have to right size. And that's, I think, a really great snapshot of what we're doing right now.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Yeah, no, you're bang on there that if, we free up that underutilized housing now for those folks that need 3 and 4 bedroom houses where we have one person kind of in that housing now, or 1 or 2 people, that helps solve
They
that
want to
market
stay in the
side.
community, they just haven't had that next step of where to go.
Yeah.
So that's a great opportunity, really excited about that.
All right, the next sort of overarching goal that council had was, making sure that we maintain a thriving economy and, and an inclusive economy. And again, this is focused on the work we do in that area. One of our key things we can do is to build those parks, those amenity spaces, those recreation facilities, et cetera, that attract people to our community, that bring visitors, et cetera. So everyone's aware that ultimately we're going to have to replace utilities on Baker Street, and the work we've been doing to date is really preparing for that by doing that utility work on the side streets, so that when we have to get to Baker Street, that we have more flexibility in providing services to those businesses that are going to be impacted by that. So that work's going on. A project that's almost probably 10 years in the making now was the whole Stores to Shore, the whole Hall Street connecting the downtown to the waterfront, and it's the Pier became a much bigger project than any of us had anticipated, and had to be really a new pier was built. I guess at the bottom line, there's nothing that was salvaged on that old pier. We actually built a new pier, new pilings, a whole new deck, etc. So that's completed. I think there's bylaw changes coming tonight for some of the fees related to utilizing that space. I think we saw good uptake this summer, and anytime I'm down there, there's always somebody out there. It's becoming a bit of an icon, and with the lighting, etc. It's one of the things you see coming into Nelson from any direction. So that's done. And these are the the work that council does to to create a place where people want to be and both live and come as a visitor. The waterfront pathway, already spoke to that. Again, it's one of those spaces that ultimately will draw people. Street safety and vibrancy was another area that council wanted us to look at. You heard from the community safety officer, their role in this. Council did pass a number of policies and bylaws to help manage public safety. We did bring bylaw in-house, and we're more actively managing how bylaw works in the community. And then we've had a number of meetings with various folks in the community from all aspects of that to try to find good workable solutions. And really the focus being on housing. If we can, that was a big incentive to, add that temporary housing at the North Shore Inn and get people housed.
So just a point of clarity, so that's not community meetings, that's meetings with organizations in the community?
Right.
Right,
Exactly.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thought I missed one.
Okay. Those other, the other area that, as I mentioned, we do work in is really our community facilities and amenities, and the work, the program expansion that we've seen at youth center, just being able to, to people to be able to have a place where they're, after school care, et cetera, allows people to work and be active in their businesses. On the recreation side, obviously the large one is this, the Nelson Recreation Campus Needs Assessment that's going on now. What does the recreation facilities look like going forward? And we've been doing, obviously that work to start to address some of the structural deficiencies in the facilities that the city owns. And then, working directly with the Nelson Civic Theatre Society on their proposed project. And then, again, community-led is some other facilities that our community is trying to make happen. The climbing gym, council, again, our role was to provide land and support for that. And the Nelson Youth Soccer Association are still looking at for an indoor facility. The mayor and a couple staff met with them recently. They've got some new blood, and they're anxious to move on that. They're bursting at the seams in the current facility, so they see they need another facility that could be utilized broadly by the community. And then really we again work in partnership with others really around economic development. That's the greater, which has recently been renamed the Greater Nelson Economic Development.
GNED.
GNED. Yeah. Ned. Yeah. Our Ned. Yeah, the acronym before was a bit of a mouthful, so we tried
when I got that down.
tried to make it more friendly. They've been working on, obviously the immigration work to attract workers to our community and things that you don't traditionally think as economic development, but, childcare, housing were our priorities of the Economic Development Partnership, in addition to their traditional business retention and expansion by local, those type of things. So, again, some data I got from our development services team is we had 208 new business licenses in 2024, a 14.5% growth in business licenses. So from 1430 to 1638 business licenses. So, that's positive news that we're still seeing business growth in our community. And then to the area that Councillor Woodward mentioned is our core services. So this is work that the is the how we support the community. So we looked at this in three areas: facilities and equipment. Again, how are we, planning for the future? That was a big theme from council when you met and set priorities. Are we being future ready with our infrastructure and our facilities, et cetera? So Nelson Hydro did complete their asset management plan. They are implementing GIS as a part of the strategy of how they manage their assets, and also had our building group present a facility asset management framework. It's not an asset management plan, but it's a framework. Again, you'll see some requests in the budget 25 around how we utilize GIS to help manage assets, and and there's a management software package that we're looking at to better manage our assets. Again, the Civic Center roof repair was the major project, again, mostly grant funded. Identifying a location for a new fire hall. We have the oldest operating fire hall in the province, maybe the country, and it just doesn't meet any post-disaster requirements, doesn't meet the future needs of the city. So again, how do we look forward to the future? Improvements at public works in City Hall. We've done I don't know if anybody's been up to the 5th floor lately, but we've installed the central corridor there and created other office spaces. Some of those are leased at the moment, and we're working with some others to hopefully secure some additional leases there. I mentioned the fleet decarbonization already. So again, we're starting to replace, gas engines with hybrids or electric vehicles, and the plan is how do we do that over time. Basic infrastructure, again, maintaining roads, sidewalks, et cetera, and really the push is how do we look at that holistically? So, we're looking at transportation. How do people get around our community, whether that's riding a bike, walking, or using a vehicle? So we're making sure that we're taking that broader approach to this.
And CAO, maybe if I could just add, just because it's there's a one-time thing that the roads so far outstripe the sidewalks that are being repaired. The sidewalk budget this year went toward the Lakeside multi-use pathway connection. So that was how we sort of made that project work. So typically we would do the sidewalk curb refurbishment when we do the paving. We were fortunate in that we had some paving that we could do that didn't require that extra pouring. But typically we look at those sidewalks and refresh them when we do that annual paving program as well. Mm-hmm. So normally that'll be 19 and 19.
Yeah. Okay. Again, parks are part of our infrastructure. The big gains in 2024 were primarily at Cottonwood Park. As council's aware, a new parking area, new sidewalks, new bridge was all added into that area. Again, we basically replaced the Hall Street Pier, walking and cycling infrastructure on Lakeside Drive, and the other big one was replacing the tramway tracks. Again, we were able to secure $1 million grant to do that work. On the information technology side, implementing NG 911 is by far the largest project there, and that's going well, and we're hoping to meet the original March 2025 deadline. So, Chris, I don't know if you know any more, but it sounds like we're on track for that to happen.
All the equipment's here. We're just waiting for the consulting group there to come out and do the install, which I think is in February. Rumors are still out there that this deadline gets pushed out, but we're still aiming for our deadlines.
And a big project that Sarah's leading is the records management and just digitizing our records. And again, this theme of being future ready is we need to move towards that. And with that comes IT security is more and more we're reliant on IT, and our records are not necessarily maintained in City Hall anymore on servers that are closed to the outside. They're more in the cloud. So that IT security side is important. Next, she's way ahead of me here. City utilities, again, large public process and plan is the liquid waste management plan, which really sets us up how we're going to handle our liquid waste into the future, and a big part of that is upgrade or replacement of the current wastewater treatment plan. I think Colin did a presentation to council on that, and it's multi-millions of dollars, and we certainly need senior level of government grants to make that viable at all. We've been doing mitigation work in our watersheds to protect our water supply. We have done work in the Railtown area, in which both looking at how we manage stormwater and utilities in that area. It's totally unserviced at this time, and if we're going to have development on that private sector side, we need to figure out how we manage that. On the finished water side, the Mountain Station Reservoir project is scheduled for 2025, which will create more finished water. Everyone saw the Mill Street substation is completed. And we have submitted an expression of interest for advanced metering. It was, again, a federal program, so we'll see where that one gets to. The next sort of objective was being resilient to natural hazards. A big part of that is community wildfire resiliency. So we updated the plan and are making good progress on that. Our emergency management plan, having a coordinator in place, has helped us advance that. And we also, the executive assistant in the fire department, has really focused largely on this area. It's all grant funded. We're constantly writing grants and implementing grants and reporting on grants. So, council's lobbied government to, just give us the money and stop making us be full-time grant writers, but we haven't quite got there yet. Well, they did one program. They did, I think, give us 2 years of funding on that. So there's some progress on that front. Extreme weather events. We did get a grant to assess our, facilities, what kind of upgrades they need to be able to serve the purpose that we've identified them for. And I think there's capital grants that are available going forward to make some of those improvements. And, our coordinator has done a good job of working with providers to create these extreme weather facilities to provide for folks that need those at that time. And as I mentioned, we certainly have written lots and have been very successful on lots of grants. All right, and the final sort of overarching goal of council is really on governance, and that was how governance supports innovation and inclusivity. So as part of that is really the policy work that council has done. The Nelson Hydro Service bylaw was recently adopted. Development services, there have been a number of initiatives that have come up from the development service team, whether it's short-term rentals, whether it's recently reducing the requirement of upgrading the water line into your secondary suite. So a bunch of areas done in there. Mentioned records management, a number of policies that council passed to support that. Big one was the general cost of capital decision that the Utility Commission recently made around Nelson Hydro and getting us on the same footing of other similar size small electric utilities. So I think we finally made progress. Unfortunately, we weren't successful on the water rights agreement with BC Hydro. And then on the parking side, we did switch the parkade to daily parking. We went to mobile parking apps, and I know there's some other policy changes that were that we had Alex Toom work on in terms of parking. On the reserve side, you'll see in the 2025 budget discussions, we'll be looking at adding more funding towards some of our reserves to address what we're anticipating as future, as we know our future requirements of capital upgrades that we're facing. And in terms of citizen and neighborhood engagement, Sarah's leading the accessibility committee, so that's formed and is up and running. And I'm sure she'll give a bit of an update as part of her presentation later on. But the big consultations were around the OCP, this recreation review that's happening now, the liquid waste management plan, all those were large public engagement processes. And then in terms of staff development, we have an active committee on truth and reconciliation, and we've done a number of events, from blanket exercises to a film that we had all our employees watch on September 30th, was it? 22nd, yeah. And I think we reported out, and I've asked our HR manager to come present to you. I think is that on, it's coming up anyway. Is it on? On the 10th, yeah. So really present on what we're doing around staff development, how we're working on, flexibility in our workplace policies to retain people, attract people. They've developed the employee manual, a new health and safety plan has been developed. We've been doing bullying and harassment training throughout the organization, and we are piloting AI, and I think we're starting to see a number of departments use that on a daily basis. People have used ChatGPT, but because Copilot is part of the Microsoft suite, that's kind of where we're focusing now, is on Copilot. And as people present, as the CSO presented, I know, we have to move towards using those tools to make us more efficient, and whether it's news releases, whether it's interviews, whether it's job descriptions, we're starting to use that more and more to get us on the right path. So yeah, a little bit going on here.
Busy town.
And the other document, I handed out, which you can read at your leisure, is some of the highlights from 2024. A lot of what I mentioned in here, there's a little bit more depth to that, but we had done that for the mayor earlier, or in anticipation of the annual reception, etc. So I thought we should share it with the rest of you, and like I said, this is sort of scratching the surface on the work that we do. This doesn't really account for the day-to-day plowing streets and maintaining parks and all those other things that we do, collecting and paying bills, etc. So yeah.
Question, Councillor Tate?
I have two quick questions
Sure.
through the chair. My first question is, where does being a landlord fall in the org chart? Like if we're renting out spaces up there, what does that fall under?
Who manages that?
Yes. Well, I didn't want you to point out a person. I was just going to go with the green, blue, orange,
Yeah.
yellow.
Yeah, so corporate services manages most of our leases. So whether
okay.
it's the 5th floor of City Hall or a license to occupy for a,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Okay.
So, we look at, this is more, we're looking at commercial returns on the space here, as opposed to, our current policy around, spaces to nonprofits and others. We look at this in a different way. So, we'll get support in terms of what are the appropriate commercial leases for that space. But as you know, currently most of that is through the provincial government leases back most of the space, but now we have developed these spaces up on the 5th floor that we're looking at, making a commercial return on those spaces.
There's like 300 words, but it could have been 2. Awesome. I love it. I love that about you.
appreciated that.
I love that about you, CAO. My other question. This could be, I have a quick one. It's a quick one. Twice you said dead in the water when you were talking about grants that have already been applied for, but we don't have any announcements on. And it just didn't occur to me, I'm so naive, that a funding program could be announced and people could do their applications, and there could have been like all of this human resources on both sides of the levels of government, and then just be like, never mind, we're not doing that. That's a thing that happens. I'm just so green. I'm so green.
We've still not heard from the federal government about an accessibility grant that got applied for when I started.
Good.
And we didn't hear that we didn't get it. Mm-hmm. So, in theory, it's still out there, but it was just all the effort that went into develop the program to make the application and then
It depends at this point whether or not these things went through Treasury or Finance, and which things require a sitting government to pass, to go on. So the question is that we don't know, and because the federal government tends to be very untimely, is that a word? In not timely in letting us know where our grants are. They're particularly bad. I mean, the provincial government is much more responsive, and part of the problem is a lot of the federal ones have to flow through the provincial government on top of everything else. Yeah, it's hard to know about some of these programs. Like, were they already really up and running, or were they announcements and then somebody had to do in some office the paperwork to get it in front of a sitting time of Parliament to actually pass? So it really is a question of who knows what's there, but if it needed this consent, it needed a vote of Parliament, and it's sitting on a table somewhere, it is dead.
So interesting. Thank you.
Everything you wanted to know, but we're afraid to ask about government. So, as I said earlier before we started the meeting, that we don't really have a lot of government happening anywhere right now because we don't have a sitting provincial government and we don't have now a sitting federal government. So, on that note, could we have a vote for a recess for dinner?
Can I just mention one other thing? We will organize a workshop after we get through the budget on relooking at our priorities and whether there's any changes that council wants to make in the direction that we're going at the present time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can I have a resolution to adjourn for dinner? Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Pinero. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, so we're back. If I could have a motion to reconvene, please. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Pinero. All those in favor? And that carries. Councillors, I didn't want to bypass the opportunity for council reports, so I'll just take 5 minutes off the top here. Did anybody have a short report that they wanted to mention, or does everybody?
Enjoy Christmas.
Well, let's hope people weren't working madly. So it looks like nothing. I'm just, on behalf of council, I just want to, again, wish everybody a happy new year. And the only thing I would like to say is that tomorrow, just a reminder, is the last day to fill out the recreation campus survey, so.
And Mayor, sorry, maybe if I could, just one small update on like an emergent project that people have likely seen if they've gone down the mall by Lakeside. Just so councillors are aware, if you haven't seen it, the entrance into the Lakeside playing fields is now dug up. We have a stormwater pipe that actually conveys a creek, Hume Creek, through there. So Hume Creek starts up Selby, Trevor, comes down there, and then crosses Morgan, down across Douglas, down to High Street, and then just sort of gets plumbed into a drainage system just above 7-Eleven there, between High Street and 7-Eleven. Well, that, we got a call of a sinkhole just before the holidays, and it was about the size of a basketball, and turns out that there's, the pipe that's down there was a corrugated metal pipe, CMP, which is something that we would never use in this day and age for something like this, because it actually just kind of rots and disintegrates. And so that pipe is buried quite deep, hence the large excavation that exists. Normally when we do excavations, we use trench boxes, but that's like 20 feet down, so we don't have a trench box that allows you to safely work in a trench that would protect you if it's slumped in. So it makes for a very large excavation, and we will be looking at what is the best way to replace that pipe, and also helps with, it's actually we're going to be able to make some lemonade out of it in the terms of our discharge from that outfall was quite low and almost kind of in the muck of Duck Bay there.
Yeah.
And so we're actually looking at how to raise that up so that we get a bit more better clearance and you know, be able to rinse some of the water through a bit better, and also looking at what we can install to keep some of the grit that we put on the roads, or the gravel that we put on the roads, from going directly into the lake. So make lemonades, but it's going to be there for another couple of months probably, especially because you can only do so much during the weather. But of course, we're very cognizant of you know, spring plans for the fields. We know that whole rhythm and everything, so we are working towards that. But you will see that will be around for a while. Large excavation, you'll continue to see work. There'll be breaks where there's not work happening due to weather. You know, our own forces sometimes might be plowing snow, or it just might not be suitable to be doing the work in the weather. So just heads up on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving right along then, item 10 is we have a couple of requests, and our first request is Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. The Futures request. On October the 17th, 2024, the Nelson Housing Committee passed a motion recommending that council approve a funding request of $5,000 from the Affordable Housing Fund to be allocated to Community Futures for the purpose of marketing and advertising their Happy Pad pilot program administered by the Greater Nelson Economic Partnership. Doesn't have a development in it anymore.
No, it's development. Greater Nelson
Nelson Economic Development. It's no P.
It just ends.
There's
yeah.
no
Yeah,
P, yeah.
okay.
Still is a partnership.
We had it all,
Just change the inflection.
It's implied.
we have it all in there.
Economic development.
GNED
GNED.
or
Med.
NED, like GNU, but GNED.
Yeah, GNU.
So, council is now being asked to consider this request. And I see that we have people from planning here, so I will turn it over to the planning department for a little background.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you had referenced, we've received 3 separate funding requests. The first one is for Community Futures for $5,000 to launch a Happy Pad program within Nelson. Staff have reviewed this against the affordable housing policy, and we do recognize that this sort of request is not explicitly listed in the policy. That being said, the policy does reference partnerships with other organizations and other levels of government. Therefore, staff would be recommending approval of this request. And the request is specifically $5,000 to assist with Happy Pad and the marketing dollars needed to advertise it to the community. Community Futures has also stepped up to the table and provided funding for a community ambassador to help market the program to Nelson residents.
Any questions or concerns, councillors? We have a resolution in front of us. Would somebody like to put it on the floor? Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Payne.
The council provides $5,000 in financial support from the Affordable Housing Fund to Greater Nelson Economic Development Partnership to fund the marketing and advertising costs associated with a Happy Pad pilot program.
Councillors, any further questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
So, item number 10B. Development Services has received requests from both Sharon Nelson and Nelson Cares for $10,000 each from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. These funds will allow both organizations to continue to prepare applications to BC Housing's Community Housing Fund, the CHF, for the Sharon Nelson project at 1306 and 1308 Fell Street, and the Nelson Cares project at 1818 to 1824 Front Street. And we still have planning staff here, so we have Ken and Natalie here. Again, a little background.
Thank you. So as council may remember, back in June, they approved $5,000 to each organization to complete feasibility studies. That work has now been completed, and both organizations have determined it's feasible to move forward to the next step, which is a formal application to the Community Housing Fund. Staff have again reviewed this request with regard to the Affordable Housing Fund, and this sort of request is permitted by the policy. Therefore, staff have recommended to move forward with the $10,000 requests. And just sort of as a point of clarification, it is outlined in the report. Both organizations have received pre-development funding from BC Housing, which covers most of the costs associated with preparing an application. One of the few things that's not covered is the actual cost for a consultant to prepare the application, and that's what the funding would be for both applications.
Okay, councillors, we have two recommendations. I think we need to pass them individually. If someone would like to put the first one on the floor, and then we'll discuss it.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Payne. Councillor Woodward.
The council provide $10,000 in financial support from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund to Share Nelson to fund the preparation of a BC Housing Community Housing Fund CHF application for 1306 and 1308 Fell Street.
Okay, councillors. Concerns, questions, comments?
I have a comment.
Councillor Tate.
Thanks. I find this process interesting because it's my first time going through this process, and I have a curiosity about the lack of feedback, like a lack of an iterative loop when it comes to these, I'm calling it like moving the napkin drawing across the table before we get to the place where we're approving the rezoning and those things. And so I have a curiosity because this table has done, I believe, what was recommended by the Macola housing entity study that became not a housing entity, which is like identify the public land and provide pre-development funding of $5,000. And I think that this table and City Council is a champion for these types of projects. And then maybe we're the second champion because we know that Sharon Cares is the champion. But I have a curiosity about where can we get to the place where we're animating the rest of the public behind it. And some of them are already animated because they're already engaged with Nelson Cares and Nelson Share. But there's not a lot of opportunity to make sure that, like, we're looking at 60 to 100 years of public good on public land. Let's make sure that the public is into it as well. And I think mostly they are. But when we're looking at $10,000, that's a dollar per person. That's a pretty quick fundraising campaign. That could be a partnership with another nonprofit, I don't know. That could be a partnership with some of the business community. I'm curious about us being the champions all the way along, or the second champion, without making sure that we're pulling along our public and who we represent as well. So that's rolling around in my head. With this lack of opportunity for the iterative process, there's been 4 comments that I recall from the table that have gone to the proponents that we don't have an opportunity to be like, and did you take that into account? There's the, just because the process isn't in that order. And so that's a challenge to me, to keep pushing the napkin drawing along and keep being the champions for the proposal. And so I'm curious and considering this without landing exactly on the yes. And so I wanted to bring that to the table as a point to ponder.
Councillor Lockenberg.
Through the chair, could you maybe expand on that a little bit more? I felt like I was with you for most of it, but I'm
Yeah, sure. So I think, and I'm new, but I think one of our core responsibilities as we look to trying to provide more affordable housing for the population is what has been identified by the consultants and encouraged by the province, which is to identify public land that could be appropriate for proposal and help by providing pre-application, pre-development funding. And we have done those things. And now we're at a place, and the group's got $250,000 to carry on. But of that $250,000, they're not allowed to spend it on this consultant piece of it. So they need $10,000 for that particular aspect, which is what they're asking for. And it falls within our policy, I think. So I don't think that staff is incorrect in saying, yeah, this falls in your policy, so here you go. But I have a curiosity about being the champions for affordable housing and these projects and these proposals as this table, or being the second champions, because CARES and SHARE are the champions, and bringing along the public. Because there's some public who are still questioning and wondering and curious about, like, how does this fall into public good? And we need to give space and time for those conversations to happen. And I feel like in the past, those sorts of things happened in fundraising campaigns or partnerships with businesses or partnerships with other nonprofits. I don't really know how that all works, but I have a curiosity about finding other ways to animate the population and to motivate and to galvanize behind these. And so that the folks who are still wondering and curious and maybe on the fence start to hear more positive aspects and start to get the opportunity to also get behind it. And not only us and the champions. So I wanted to bring that to the table as this opportunity to make it a community project.
And Mike, just to follow up, and I'll let you go. Like, in my mind, I just looked at this $10,000 ask, and it is within the policy that we have. We've given both these agencies already $5,000 to do some of the initial sort of legwork around things. But the question, and I think, and it follows a little bit to, I think, what Councillor Tate is saying, is the regional district, who can't really, for a majority of reasons, can't seem to be able to build any kind of housing there of substance, because there's always some issue around, well, they don't have sanitary sewer, or they don't have this, or they don't have that, and they don't have zoning in E and whatever, is that, but we're still housing people that have an effect on what we do as Greater Nelson. And, has anybody bothered to ask the regional district, or those that live in E and F, who aren't building housing, this style of housing in their community area, that maybe they should, through some of their granting opportunities, be maybe putting this $10,000 on the table, right? Because that increases the sort of buy-in, and particularly from a community where we know that there isn't, we're not going to see these kinds of projects built in your area, right? We're just not going to see them. So I think it's just a question. Councillor Lockwood, you had, sorry to interrupt. You had the floor.
that was helpful. So I'm understanding those as different but related, in the sense that, Mayor, what sounds like what you're talking about is broadening the stakeholder community, so that people who, certainly the regional district that has an economic interest in providing, and a social interest in providing affordable housing, should play a role. So that makes sense to me. And what I'm understanding Councillor Tate is saying, through the chair, that what you're looking for is for the community, and certainly the residents that are likely to be affected by these projects, like the 10th Street project, for example, in Fairview, it's that community has expressed that they haven't been adequately consulted, and that this feels like it's on the rails and it's way ahead of the neighborhood's chance to engage with it. But more broadly speaking, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand the role of fundraising is in some sense like community engagement. It's a way to measure the community's desire for this kind of activity. And I wonder if that really works in this case, because the incentives might be a little bit too distant, in the sense of, if you're fundraising for a new arena, then the people you're going to have some sort of vested interest, direct or closely direct, to that project. They have kids that play hockey, or there's some incentive there. Whereas an affordable housing project is something that people generally, they want it societally, but they don't necessarily want it in their neighborhood. And so the fundraising signal that you're looking for in terms of community support for that project might come from outside that neighborhood, but the people in that neighborhood generally likely be opposed to it in general. And so what I'm wondering is if what we're looking for is both a way of gauging and bringing the neighborhood that's likely to be affected along. So doing that better, and maybe broadly speaking, doing what you're suggesting that loops in with what the mayor's saying in terms of the RDCK, going back out to all of the stakeholders, like businesses who have an interest in more workforce housing, RDCK who has a economic and social interest as well, and fundraising from them to take responsibility for this broader social issue. So what I'm seeing is two things that are different, both important, but not necessarily complementary in terms of what you're seeking, as far as I'm understanding, because I think I'm agreeing with you. What I've been hearing from the community in terms of these projects that we're pursuing is the general response is, love it, as in theory, I think it's really important that we have affordable housing. I just don't want it here because of all of the effects it's going to have in the neighborhood in terms of traffic and all of these other things. And so I agree, or I won't even necessarily say I agree because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe that the community in the neighborhoods, and we need to do a better job of bringing the neighborhoods and the community along. I think the OCP update is a part of that, but it's not sufficient. Because many people, when I said that, I'm like, we have this OCP review process. You should really engage with it through that vehicle. Most people said either didn't really know about it, or I didn't realize that's what it would do. Like, I just didn't get it, which I can understand. So it's kind of a mutual failing in that respect. So as far as voting and supporting this initiative, I am a little on the fence. I came into this expecting to vote for it. I'm a little on the fence in terms of I agree with both of those views. Like, I want to see the RDCK more involved. I want to see the business community, who's been pretty good, but continue to be more involved. And I think what you're talking about in terms of $10,000 is pretty small. It would be a good way to continue to build everybody's buy-in. And I would also say on top of that, I'd like to do better at communicating to the public that these things are coming. And as much as we can't talk about some of the specifics for obvious reasons, we have to do a better job of preparing these neighborhoods for what's coming. Like, that's what I heard in Fairview. I knew you guys were doing this, but I didn't think it was going to be here. I thought it would be downtown. And so this comes as a shock to me that you're now considering up here. And so that's something I'd like to address. So whether I'll support this money now, and I would really look forward to getting a better fundraising ask out to the RDCK and other stakeholders. And I would really like us to begin the conversation about talking about how to better prepare the community for what's coming. Sorry for that super long-winded take, but.
Councilor Woodward.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I just feel like we are unrolling what the community asked us to do 5 years ago. And in really clear terms, it was like when we did surveys, when we went out to the community, it was like housing, housing, housing. And even more so, affordable housing. We've been in a 0% vacancy rate here for over a decade. It's probably closer to 15 years. I mean, it is a housing crisis in this town, and I feel like, as Councilor Lockmer said, like, we're doing what the community asked, but people are like, oh, you're doing it here. It's like, this is where the land we own is here, and we're actually doing what the consultants say to do. We're doing what the community says to do. We're doing what the province says to do. Like, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and I always have it in my mind that if we don't constantly have housing in the pipeline, every house, every unit in this town just continues to rise and become more and more affordable. And we are also at the end of in the late 90s and early 2000s, all that funding for affordable social housing was pulled federally, and then the result was nothing was really being built at that time, and now we're in this incredible deficit of housing. So I think probably a lot of communities feel like it's coming fast and furious, but at the same time, if we don't keep pushing these along and basically constantly have housing and density in the pipeline, we're going to fall behind because we're already way behind. So I feel very challenged that it's like we're doing what everyone asks us to do, and it's still not good. It's still not right. And it's like, I don't know what to say to that.
Can I respond?
Sure,
Yeah.
Councillor Tate.
Thanks. So almost, but no, I'm not, and so then because you piggybacked off that, I'm not thinking that fundraising is going to flip the opinion of a person who might be living within a block of a 5-story building and they're not there in their hearts and minds and property values and all the things that we've heard. What I'm saying is what Councillor Woodward is saying, and as a reminder to folks, this is what you have asked for. This is what has been indicated to us by the province and the federal government and our consultants, and reminding people that this is what we need together. Because what right now it's creating is a lot of division, is what I'm seeing. I've been having a lot of 7 a.m. coffee meetings, and I'm seeing division. And so if you can have those conversations and I can have those conversations, but we need more than the 7 of us having those conversations and our champions at Share and Cares. And it won't necessarily be the exact neighborhood that is donating $1, but what I'm saying is that this is a community good, this is a social good, this is a well-being, this has to do with our sustainability of our community for 60 years. And we need to be able to have those conversations, and people should be having them with one another, not just here at this table, and then they see it in the paper and they're like, my city council did a thing. So that's, yes, a little bit, yes. And then the other, I lost my train of thought. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I
So-
just clarify?
Sure.
Yeah, I just think it's important that, you have a few different roles, right? One is, this quasi judicial role in terms of rezoning and, around a specific project. And I think you need to, when you're talking about champions of housing, I think you need to just be careful that, you will go through a process of considering specific rezoning, and you need to, keep an open mind around that project. And I think what you're, what you're talking about is, housing in general.
Yes.
We do an OCP, we identify what our policies are, how the community is supposed to develop out, and I think that's, and I'm hearing the same thing, Councillor Lattenberg, I think that's the work that needs to be done, is to, yes, people understand what that means, those OCP policies, the zoning that we'll put in place, etc. What does that look like? This is how our community is going to develop out. That's what the OCP is meant to do, give people a vision of what's, so I think, yes, do that work up front, and I, realistically, at the end of the day, if you do a really fabulous job, you may not have as many people that go, oh, I didn't know that was going to be in my neighborhood. I think that's the reality. We don't necessarily pay attention until, someone comes out and starts surveying the lot and going, oh, you mean here? So I think you just need to be careful that, these two zone applications are going through a zoning process, and that has its own process that you have to honor and seek input and consider and all those sorts of things. So keep that, tight to that piece. These, it's because you have different roles. One role is to, to support affordable housing as a whole, and some you have affordable housing application that advances certain projects that you still have to make some zoning decisions on, and these are, at least the the lease, the intent to lease that land to these organizations is depending on a successful rezone, which is you haven't made a decision at this point to lease any land to anybody until it's subject to a successful rezoning. You have to go through that process, and if the rezoning is approved by council at the end of the day, then you approve the lease. So it makes it a bit messy, because you're doing some things to advance a specific project, which is really more in context of the overall goal of affordable housing. So it's, unfortunately, it's not you know, you're gonna be in these little bit of messy things, because you're got a couple different roles here. You're not advocating for this project, and specifically you're advocating for affordable housing, and you will determine that through the rezoning process whether you feel this is the right place for that and is the right height and these other variances that you'll consider. So it does, and I get how the public goes, well, you seem to be supporting this project, and we haven't even gone through the process yet. So, you know, that's an unfortunate part of wearing multiple hats in terms of different roles that you have, because you have some distinct roles. So hopefully that kind of helps. That, you know, I think definitely you want to look at that broader range. And as far as the idea around an affordable housing fund and broadening that, and, you know, we can look at some policy adjustments. Maybe you have to match. Maybe you have to go out and fundraise and get matching funding to access the affordable housing fund. Or so there's definitely policy work that you can do to meet some other goals or around that. Or maybe you need to, you know, have a certain level of public support before we consider providing affordable housing funds to you, or whatever. There's multiple things you could look at as far as that policy side of it.
So,
Just a question. Quick one. Just a quick question.
We're done.
done. It's all over. I just wanted to just point out the fact that Cher is holding an open house this coming Monday night at the Prestige from 5 to 7, and I would encourage all of council to be there, and also within your circles to share that information with people. That's a shareable, and I think it's important to be there for a bit of time to hear what the conversation might be. So that's this coming Monday from 5 to 7 at the Prestige. Councillor Lockenberg.
Just a quick clarification. So I appreciate this discussion. I'm still not, so I had asked for clarification through the chair about what the fundraising part, because it sounded like, and I misheard, that the fundraising was a way of also gauging public support or something like that. So I wanted clarification on that, because what I was responding to is that I feel that we need to do more on these projects, similar to just literally what you said afterwards in response. It was like, yes, that's what I'm trying to get at, is a way of communicating more broadly what's coming and why, and reflect back to people what they've been asking for, and then to prepare them for the chance or the possibility that it could happen in your neighborhood. That might be what that looks like. So just question then, clarification on what that fundraising part was about.
I think the question is, can the city give $10,000 additional pre-development funds? Is that basically what this question is?
That's what's on the table.
Yes. So my response to that is, I would be interested in seeing other places to ask for that money. And I think that fundraising, whether it's through partnerships, whether it's like a coldest night of the year thing, or that Raise the Roof that happened at Ward Street Place 20 years ago-ish, and those sorts of things that remind community members what they have asked for. Now, I appreciate the CAO's reminder that it would be possibly fundraising not for a specific project that is not yet rezoned. And that's like really challenging in these conversations as well. That is really difficult to tease that out. And I'm struggling with it as well, because I'm hearing that, and I keep saying this napkin drawing that's getting pushed, but the rezone has not happened. And those two conversations are separate and distinct and two hats. And I think that the public is challenged with that as well. And so I have a curiosity about galvanizing the public behind these ideas and these like these 5-year-long asks and this pipeline and the OCP, and animating folks behind public good and community good. And there will be people who would donate to a hockey rink that don't play hockey. And there will be people who donate to the hospital that, or a CT scanner that never need a CT scanner. So I would reject that argument. But.
Yeah, well, I mean,
just an example.
Just the argument was just an example. Like that kind of thing happens. But then to your point, thank you for that clarity. That helps. What I'm then trying to then get a handle on is, in context of this decision here, are we asking potentially for, like, if we approve this, are we asking for more work to be done on fundraising before the rezone, or because I'm trying to get at the win-win here, or
Maybe, like, it's always good, if you have a policy, people follow the policy, they apply under the policy.
sure, yeah,
Generally, you should
follow the policy and then change
Follow
the
the
policy
policy.
for the
never
next.
change, you know, if you want fundraising or
Thank
they
you.
Yeah.
raise so much themselves, do that on the policy side and consider that, you know, do that policy work, then they have clear direction, know what the expectations
Yeah.
of them, because we've given them expectations right now.
Based
You
on the
do
policy.
this, you fit, and unless you feel they're not following the policy for some reason, then you probably wouldn't approve it. However, you know, I think it's fair to proponents when we create programs, ask them to, you know, to respond in those programs that, you know, you're consistent with applying those. But, you know, these are always good things to say, well, maybe we haven't really fully thought through the policy and we should look at some policy changes for, you know, the next applicant. So, anyway,
Right.
that's my.
Yeah, and I agree with that, CEO, and I'm just trying to, separately, was this notion of providing funding for hiring consultants to apply for the grant application, that is in our policy, or it allows in our policy, but we don't directly.
No, you could say, we think we funded them enough. And we
Yeah,
Say the 5,000
okay, so
was
that's
enough.
what I'm,
Yeah.
that's what I'm understanding. We didn't tell them, or they didn't have the implied promise ahead of time that this was,
No.
money was available to them.
All
Okay,
I'm suggesting is don't put a new rule.
don't just create a new rule,
Yeah.
but we don't have to pass this and
No,
we'll
you
still
don't have
follow
to
the
pass
policy.
this.
Say,
And
Okay.
then what they might have to do is they might have to look at what I said,
Yeah, go to the RDCK,
or what Councillor Tate said,
sure,
or whatever else
right,
they might need to do to find
got it,
$10,000 if that's the
catching
cost
up.
of their consultant, right?
yeah, okay,
So that's the ask is just the ask. It's coming from the Affordable Fund.
right,
The CAO is right. You know, we have policies. We change our policies.
right, but this is not,
This isn't about
this isn't,
This
yeah,
isn't about us having a communication scheme to say this is what we're doing, because actually we're not doing it. Share and Care are doing it.
yeah, got it, yes, this helps me enormously, and just to add to what we're talking about more broadly with respect to cares and shares, they are on a trajectory, and there's a sunk cost here that's growing over time. And I think we just need to be aware in our communications with them that because I think the pressure to approve a rezone, given all of the sunk cost here, is going to be enormous. And for us to preserve that objectivity in the quasi-judicial role we need to play, given that the investments we've made, the investments they've made, it'll be very difficult for us not to follow through. And I think what would help everybody is really be proactive in our communication about what the process is. There is a rezone coming. There's no guarantee it's going to pass. That's something that has to happen in that neighborhood, as well as to our proponents, and really work to encourage and support them as much as we can, because they're doing amazing work for the community. And boy, how disheartening is it going to be if it comes to that date and they don't get the rezone, unless we've worked with them ahead of time to prepare for that possibility. Otherwise, it's just going to be really hard and disruptive on everybody if we don't.
And don't forget, there's one other possibility. That neither of them get funding,
That's true too.
which is completely out of the hands of the city of
Yeah.
Nelson, because we're not the funder.
My hope is we get to a place where these projects get developed, the neighborhood is really supportive because they've come up with a design that really works and adds to that neighborhood, and that this creates the momentum for the next project as well. That's the goal, and I think leaning into that goal is going to be important to help steer us along the way.
That they have many steps yet to go through.
Yeah.
Some that we'll make the decision about, others that the provincial government will make.
Yeah.
There is no
That's-
guarantee that Nelson is getting money for one, let alone two. And we still have one that's also getting provincial funding in a certain extent down at the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, Councillor Payne would like to have a word.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what the CAO has said, is that there are many steps. I think based on our strategic direction, community request, the understanding of how deeply we are in a housing deficit, we have 2 organizations that are championing, and in my opinion, we would welcome others with the same level of experience to come to the table and propose similar projects. The Housing Affordability Fund has been put in place for this particular opportunity. To me, it's pretty clear. In actual point of fact, the $15,000 that the City of Nelson is coming forward with has already been just topping up what both the CBT and the, at the time, NAEDP, but now the GNED, has brought forward. So it is a collaborative supporting of this project moving forward, as well as the provincial government. I also just want to say that I do believe that we could do a much better job, and it gets sort of back to the civic education piece of how these projects come together. And how do we do that when we're always sort of understaffed and overwhelmed with what's going on and everybody's just racing to keep up? I don't know, but I think it has been a real opportunity for a lot of people in both of the neighborhoods, as well as with the recreation survey that's out there, to better understand and create some interest around the project. Because hopefully not only these 2 projects or something very similar to them, plus what's going on down in Railtown, will just be the beginning of that pipeline that will get us out of this housing deficit. But I believe the policy is there. These fall within the policy. We have not utilized funding in this fund to any great degree. We still have a reasonable amount of money there. We're not bankrupting ourselves to give out $10,000 to 2 organizations. So it is an investment to me in the well-being of our community. And yeah, thank you to the boards of, these are boards that are bringing this forward, that doing the most of the heavy lifting on this. It's not necessarily staff. They're obviously working with staff, but these are board members, so members of our community that are stepping forward to do this work. I'm very appreciative of that.
Okay, seeing no, Councillor Pinero.
I don't really need to if you're busy. I mean, or not
You
busy.
need to.
You're busy.
I'm busy trying to chair the meeting and take some notes. I'm busy, but
Just wanted to comment on this, the fund as it is. I think there is, like, I completely agree with Councillor Tate, and I'm also sensitive and hear these same voices about, people feeling a little taken aback and don't want this in next to their house and all these things, but also everyone else has been, I think, right in the sense that this is all, it's all slow to happen, and it's all a need, and it needs to happen in some way. It's interesting that the item before this was a different way, right? Like, we were building, and I think that's one of the fears that I hear from people, is that we're building, and it's going to change the face of the town completely, because the only answer that sort of resonates in people's head is that we're going to build more houses. Part of getting out of a housing deficit and a crisis is utilizing the housing that we have, which is what the item before did. So the idea that this is not one solution, but many solutions that mesh together and make sense in that relationship, I think needs to be perhaps communicated more, and also focused on, like, we don't necessarily need infinitely more housing forever. We need to find ways to utilize the housing that we have in ways that make sense for our community. And then, as to narrow it down to this ask and this fund, I think that fund, my understanding of it, is to facilitate these sorts of finding solutions. It's not to fund housing. Like, we don't have enough money in there to build a house. So It's just, we're not, by giving $10,000, we're not building that house. We're just finding, we're articulating the options that exist around that and fleshing out those options and making it very clear whether it's a good idea or not, and then it will be a good idea or not. You know what I mean? So I support the ask and I would just highlight in the sense of, you know, engagement with the community. Like, it's not all about just building new housing. It is about finding other ways of using the housing we've got that's more effective, I guess. And that seems to be happening, and I think we need to focus on those relationships as well going forward, and agreed with everybody else about, you know, not changing the rules of the game halfway through, of course. But that's it.
Okay, I think everybody's had a chance. So the resolution number 1 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor and opposed? And would you like to be recorded?
No.
Thank you.
Guys.
Okay. And
Can we refer to staff to look at this policy, because I am curious about the muddying between the two hats. And I want to afford due process in a way that I'm a pretty considered person and I can pull things apart and I'm a critical thinker, but I have concerns about these two hats muddying the water when we get to that semi-judicial component. So I don't know how to fix that, but I'm curious if there is a way to fix that, whether it has to do with money requests not being specific to projects, perhaps, or money requests needing, there could be a way to do that.
So Councillor Tate, just in terms of time.
Yes, thanks. Could we refer to staff?
Yeah, and I think staff, are you, like, do you want to pass like a fancy motion? Or do you feel that staff has now heard that and we can ask staff to put that on their work plan somewhere to bring us back a review of the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund money policy?
Is it not already in here?
So
Staff are reviewing the Affordable Housing Fund policy and will be preparing a report with recommendations for updating the policy.
Cool, thanks.
That's under legislative
and we
input.
are scheduling a housing workshop to look at strategies so we can incorporate it into that discussion.
So they're already on it. They're just ahead of the game. All
Usually.
The time. All the time.
Usually.
Thank you.
Okay, resolution number 2, recommendation number 2. Can I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Payne.
The council provides $10,000 in financial support from the Affordable Housing Fund to Nelson Cares to fund the preparation of a BC Housing Community Housing Fund application for 818 to 824 Front Street.
So, councillors, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any information or comments that weren't already made in regards to resolution number 1 that need to be made in regards to resolution number 2? Seeing nobody jumping up. All those in favor and opposed and not recorded. Okay, thank you. Moving on. So, thank you to staff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken and Natalie, for your time. So we have, moving on to item 12, we have a number of bylaws to go through this evening. And the first one is the Lakeside Park Wharf Bylaw, Hall Street Pier Regulation Bylaw, and Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw. This request is for council to provide first 3 readings to the Lakeside Park Wharf Bylaw number 3616, 2024, Hall Street Pier Bylaw number 3610, 2024, and Fees and Charges Amendments, Parks Bylaw number 3611, 2024. These bylaws provide a comprehensive regulatory framework for the management and operation of the Lakeside Park Wharf and Hall Street Pier, as well as associated fees and charges for weddings at the Hall Street Pier. These bylaws ensure the safe, orderly, and efficient use of public spaces while generating necessary, cost recoverable revenue to support maintenance and operations. So there's a backgrounder before you, and did we have any staff that wanted to say anything?
No, they've gone.
Um,
They moved
I
back.
think some of it,
Yeah, I think the only thing to note is this is just to deal with, we're getting requests around weddings, et cetera.
it's about weddings.
Yeah.
A more in-depth policy is going to be
Yeah.
coming forward, probably at the February.
At the February 4th meeting, we haven't quite decided yet whether we have time to bring forward the bylaws.
Right, okay.
And go through a whole procedure, sort of snapshot and revamp for special events, including weddings, or whether we will workshop it with council.
Councillor Payne.
So that's why it says weddings all the way through, not special events.
Yes,
Because
yeah.
I was having a hard time understanding why feels like we're sort of spotlighting weddings as okay, you guys, we're
And we
cranking
are.
it up. And,
We are, because of the number of
so if I want to have
requests.
my birthday party, it would only be $100 per hour. It wouldn't be $500. I just don't know what the difference is. And when you get that site for that much money, are we cordoning that off? Is that, it's going
That
to
would
then
be, is
become
it your-
a private event?
That's now a private event.
Yeah, so that's the $500.
That's why there's
is
a-
you get it
yeah.
cordoned off, and there's.
So there's the doing of that, and then
I'm
there's the
sort of
taking of
trying to
that down, and
understand what
there's
the
the.
$500 for 2 hours is worth.
So, as, you know, when council looked at approving the canopy, we were asked to do a business case around how that could be funded through leasing that space out. And part of that was, you know, we did some research on what would, you know, those private functions like a wedding, probably a birthday party or something, what would, you know, what's the market rate for those? And, you know, the direction was, you know, we should be looking at market rates for private functions, and, you know, public rates for public functions. So, so this is the first step in moving towards that direction from council to, you know, create a revenue stream here that can fund that cost of that project longer term.
Can I ask how many weddings were booked last year?
At that location, we
Yes.
didn't allow any of those to be booked at that location.
But we are having people inquire now.
We are, yes.
And so until we have it by bylaw, until we have a fee by bylaw, we cannot have a wedding at the pier or any event for that matter. So that's why this is being brought forward.
I have a question.
Councillor Tate.
I can't picture what it would be like for people that are trying to bring their boat while it's a private event. Can you help me understand that?
Yeah, so the private event we would not be able to cordon off the whole pier.
Okay.
For one thing. There's, if you go down to the pier, you know, there's the walkways up.
Yeah.
And then on either side of the canopy,
Yeah.
that would be open to the public.
Oh, okay.
So
the dock is still open.
The dock
and the
would-
sides on either side of the canopy is
Yeah.
still open. Okay.
they would have to be. It would be like having a wedding. It's comparable to having a wedding down at Lakeside Park. So you have to pull a special event permit. You have to get one of those, and you may get married on the grass, but there's people all around. Like, we don't cordon off anything. We just say, yes, you can have your wedding down here.
And to be clear, we don't allow watercraft, just for clarity.
I meant the paddle boards, for example.
Or paddleboards, yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
I'll move number 1.
Okay, so, and is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Tate.
I have one more question.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, do you want to go? You go first.
Well,
Sorry,
can you second? We get
I've
it.
got a
So,
bloody nose.
okay. So it's been moved. It's been moved. I'm
do you need
gonna
some
say
ice or
seconded by
anything?
Councillor Payne then. So it's moved by Woodward, seconded by Payne. Tate has a question.
I have a question as well. That
And,
was
okay,
mine.
Payne out first and then over to Councillor Tate.
So I just need some clarity around this. And I know it sounds like we're getting something a month from now, so that's what's, I guess, a little confusing for me, but I understand people want to book their weddings. I have a whole story around that I will not share right now. So if you want to get married in at Lakeside, I'm looking here and it's $20. The booking fee for the Rotary Shelter, oh no, that's the flight, Rotary Shelter without the barbecue is $20. So you can get married at Lakeside for 20, no.
No, because it's a private event. So
What
if
am
you
I
look at
looking
the,
at? I'm
so
Parks Facilities,
it's $100, sorry? Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Scan to the next page.
And it says, community event free, private event, $100. So you pay that $100 plus the $20 if it's Rotary Shelter.
So this Parks Facilities sheet that I actually printed out, I'll go and take a look. That's a different thing.
And Councillor Payne, we're going to be looking at
Harmonized.
all of those fees and charges, but for now, right now, we just wanted to make sure that we could book some weddings at Pier.
Yeah, just as we kind of started looking at this and you realize, boy, there's a lot that needs to be changed here.
Yeah.
But, you know, in the essence of time and folks sort of saying like, hey, can I do this or not? How much is it going to cost? It's like, okay, let's just at least get that in place and we can deal with this other stuff.
Okay,
Because
I
this other
guess that's
stuff
why
needs
it's
to be.
confusing to me because
Totally.
it's not cohesive.
Yes.
I was having a hard time
Yeah.
seeing the full
If
picture
you
around it.
can wait till the next iteration.
I will stop right now.
No,
that
it's just
I know
because it
it's
is
not
there
all
because
together.
the staff have
No,
been
I
struggling.
get it now, but I didn't when I was going through all this
Yeah.
material. I just had so many questions. It didn't seem to have a clear line from
Staff
whatever.
wanted to bring this in December, but this matrix, and so it does need to be a matrix, and Councillor Tate and Councillor Page, if he was here, we did this kind of matrix with recreation where it was trying to look at the public good, and so in terms of recreation, it was youth things probably take more priority than adult things, and then like not-for-profits take more consideration
Yeah,
than
I
a
saw that in there.
commercial event, and so there's a big matrix, and so I could see where a workshop versus this just coming back so that we can flush it out and everybody understands how that works for all of our facilities, but like, they need to all be unfortunately somewhat increased because the cost of maintenance of keeping everything all spick and span has not gotten any less. And so I think there has to be consideration. And so I think we'll see a much bigger price list, or whatever we want to call this, the fees and service charge list, will look much different once we get it done.
Got it.
But
Okay.
there's this pressure of people phoning downstairs going, so, can I have my wedding?
Yeah.
So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Tate, did you get your question answered?
I did not.
Okay.
With regards to fishing from the wharf, is it possible that you could have fishing that's non-casting or the little kids are down there and I'm just curious, I know it's an insurance thing. Could there be fishing on one side? Is there any way we can have some fishing?
Yeah.
Can we, if we have a workshop,
Yes.
can we bring that
Yes.
back for a bit of discussion in the workshop? So
Yes.
like, cause you've just now segued right off the,
Well, it's on page
well,
three.
it's there, but we're
We're
trying to
talking
figure
about
out weddings.
We're trying to
It's
get.
just weddings. That's
We're just
why
trying to do
I talked about
weddings. We're trying not to
special
fix the whole
events.
policy right now.
Okay, sounds
We
good.
do fishing at weddings.
It's
Well,
just,
it's a,
Well, but it could be, but
it's a
it's
private
if it's your
event, but
private
you don't have
event, then
access to the walkways on the side. So unless
$500 and
you
you
are
can fish.
casting from under the shelter,
Yeah.
it's gonna be tricky.
Yeah, I also had a question just about the
We're
the
creative,
bylaw
yes.
for the wharf. And there seems to be lots of things that aren't allowed, fishing amongst that. What, is this the right time to ask about the wharf, or we just want to focus on weddings?
So
It's
because there
weddings.
is the wharf, like the Lakeside Wharf bylaw, is that the one you're talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, shoot, now is the time, because it is,
it's in here, yeah.
It is the
Yeah,
bylaw.
sorry,
It's what
the
we're
wharf.
passing.
This is the Lakeside Park Wharf. So this is different than the Pier
Yeah.
Wharf.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
is
This is the Lakeside
3616.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like,
That's the
just
next
not
one.
being a big water sports person, I can't swim. What is the envisioned use of a wharf that you cannot moor a watercraft on, fish from, use in any way?
You
What-
just pull
what
your
is it
boat in and
for?
get out and go.
The wharf is for launching your boat.
Yeah.
It's
It's a
not
boat.
to tie up your boat.
Yeah,
to.
that's right. So
So
boat
you can-
launch might
you
be.
can, you can.
Yeah, you
okay.
can load your stuff in, your you get in your boat and all that stuff, but you just can't moor it there.
Thanks, maybe
Yeah.
that's a silly question, it just doesn't seem.
no, if you're not a
like
water
you
person,
can
you need to ask
actually
that question.
use the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, shall I read the number one?
Sure.
Okay. That the Lakeside Park Wharf Bylaw number 3616, 2024 be introduced and read a second time by title only.
Okay. So,
First,
Yeah,
So it should be,
where's
Oh,
the
red.
first? Okay, first and second.
first
Oh.
and second, sorry.
Okay, is that a,
No, that's okay, that's
okay,
that's a housekeeping error.
Okay,
That's not a
right.
amendment.
so first and then number two is a second, okay.
Yeah, so
No.
is there a
No.
second or, no,
One
no.
is first and second.
First, number
Okay.
one is first and second, I was just missing the first.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So is there a seconder?
so this is the Wharf one down by
Wharf,
Lakeside.
yes.
That we're
Counselor
gonna,
Tate, seconds. All those in favor, and that carries. Okay, let's see if we can do number two.
Okay, I will move
Thank
it.
you, Counselor Woodward, seconded by Counselor Tate.
Okay, that Lakeside Park Wharf Bylaw number 3616, 2024 be read a third time by title only.
Okay, and that one's correct, so all those in favor, and that carries. Thank you.
All right,
Moving on to recommendation number 3.
all right. Oh,
Same thing.
Counselor Tate,
I'll second.
seconded by Counselor Tate. Are you
this
okay
is
with
the
talking?
Pier, yeah,
This
that
is
the
Pier.
Hall Street Pier regulation bylaw number 3610, 2024 be introduced and read a first and second time only?
Yep,
Yeah.
that one's right.
Okay, it's not right.
Missed- oh, missed
It
the
needs
first
to be
again, yeah.
corrected, yeah.
Okay, and that's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Question by Counselor Payne.
So this is the one where we're passing this now for weddings, and then we will have a workshop and information coming back with a more fulsome understanding of what the fees will be for
No, that's gonna
all
be
events.
5 and 6.
5 and 6.
So we're
Okay,
still now
thank you.
doing like the
Gotcha. Yep,
regulations
That's
about
why I wanted to ask.
docking, fishing.
Thank you.
Yeah, 5, but 5 and 6, you have the answer to 5 and 6.
Good.
So all those in favor?
Wait, I need to move her
It was moved by
Yeah.
Counselor Tate,
Tate
seconded
and
by Counselor
Woodward.
Woodward.
for the third reading?
For the second reading,
Number 3.
first and second, so,
Number 3
because then we had a question.
Good, got it.
So, and now that's passed. Now we're gonna go to recommendation number 4.
I will move that.
Counselor Woodward,
I will second.
Counselor Tate,
That the Hall Street Pier Regulation Bylaw number 3610, 2024 be read a third time by title only.
okay, all those in favor? And that carries. Now we're on to item number 5. Do we have a mover?
I will move.
Moved by Counselor
I will
Tate,
second.
seconded by Counselor Woodward. Counselor Tate.
That the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3611, 2024 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Questions or concerns? Now we're on the one and only fee change. A schedule will be coming back at a workshop.
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor? And that carries. And let's give it one more round here. Recommendation number 6,
I
moved
will
by
move
Counselor
that.
Woodward,
Second.
seconded by Counselor Tate.
Okay, that the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3611, 2024 be introduced and read a third time by title only.
Great, okay. And all those in favor? And that carries, thank you. Counselor Tate, not that I should be sharing with the world that you're having a bit of a nosebleed, but you need to recuse for a moment.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, because if we had an ice cube machine, which I keep thinking we should buy for the kitchen, I'd be getting you some ice, but, okay.
This too shall pass.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we are on to bylaw number 12, B. And, secondary suites and laneway houses, the water line upgrades. So, in order to reduce barriers for property owners seeking to create additional dwellings on existing properties, is it proposed to cease requiring the replacement of existing non-conforming half-inch water service connections with 3/4-inch water service connections for secondary suites and laneway houses. It is also proposed to increase the minimum size of pipe used for new service connections from 3/4 inch to 1 inch in order to future-proof infrastructure for infill. Accordingly, staff have prepared subdivision and development servicing bylaw amendments, secondary suite and laneway house service bylaw number 3615. Council is now requested to adopt the bylaws. So councillors, this was at our last meeting, and I think that everybody got the full idea of what we were doing here. I believe we had Alex? Did we have Alex remote?
We did, yeah.
We did last time, we don't today. No, but I mean, I can say,
No, yeah.
we had Alex, just to remind people of the previous meeting, we had Alex remote in to explain this to us. I think we asked some good questions and got, I think, appropriate answers.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Payne. Councillor Woodward,
That the subdivision and development servicing bylaw amendment, secondary suite and laneway house water service bylaw number 3615, 2024 be finally adopted.
okay. And hopefully there aren't any last questions. We do have development services in the room if anybody needed to ask one last question. Okay, I think we're all good. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you, Council. Okay, moving on to 12C. The Board of Variance Bylaw 3622 and Advisory Planning Commission Bylaw 3621, 2025. So current APC Bylaw number 3244, 2012 and Board of Variance Bylaw number 3251, 2012 have not been amended since adoption in 2012. Since then, legislative changes and current needs requiring updates to both bylaws. Development Services proposes repealing both of these bylaws and adopting new bylaws that meet current standards. So you have a bit of a bylaw there, and it looks like staff have returned to the hot seats. And so I'll turn it over to Ken and Natalie for maybe a little bit of an explanation, and then we'll try our hand at for recommendations.
Great, thank you. As the mayor had referenced, we have 2 bylaws here that haven't been reviewed in quite a long time. So staff are recommending new bylaws to do a number of different things, including updated references to the enabling legislation, so the Local Government Act. In the case of the APC bylaw, changing the potential composition of members who are appointed. Currently, the APC bylaw is very prescriptive, and it states that each member of the committee must represent a specific sector of the community. So, for example, someone from the economic, social, cultural, environmental sector. Staff are recommending a change so it's not so prescriptive. Over a number of years, we've had difficulty recruiting people to this committee, as well as the Board of Variance. So we're still looking for a wide cross-section of viewpoints from people, but rather than being very prescriptive, we want to have it a little bit more loose, so to speak, so that if we find someone who is suitable to be appointed to the commission, we can recommend them. For example, if someone who is now representing the economic sector leaves the commission and we have another person who doesn't necessarily fit into that category, we can still move forward with a recommendation to support them being on the commission. As well, we had a number of changes, including clarifications to the APC meeting procedures, particularly around just the mechanics of how the meetings work and the order in which people speak. So in this particular case, staff would first present to the commission, followed by the development applicant, and then thirdly, members of the public. In the case of, again, the APC bylaw, just clarification on the types of applications that would go to the commission. So in this case, OCP amendments, rezonings, and anything else that may be referred to it by council or the director. In the case of the Board of Variance bylaw, there's very few changes, just changes to the references to the Local Government Act, and then again, clarifications on meeting procedures. Thanks.
Councillor Payne.
I just have a couple of questions, and one is my understanding of the, I'm gonna get it, not the the APC, the Advisory Planning Commission, was more sort of an, I don't know if these things go together, but an ad hoc standing committee. I didn't realize that it met. Does it currently meet regularly on a monthly schedule? No, it's called generally when there's a need for the committee to look at a particular situation. But now you're talking about having an annual meeting schedule set in December?
Generally, we would like to have a schedule so that staff can plan. So when a developer comes in and submits a development application, we can generally say the commission meets on whatever it might be, the first Thursday of the month, and then they can have some certainty around that, rather than we'll need to get back to you and say, we're not sure when they can meet.
Okay. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. And the second part of that question is, I didn't actually understand that, so the public can come to those meetings. That wasn't something that I was aware of. I thought they had, like, the public meeting, the developer went out and had a time when the public within such a radius of the property in question could make comments. But, so is that new that the public can come to the meeting, or was that always the case and I just didn't understand that?
For at least the past 10 years, the public has,
I didn't understand.
and they have a right to come to that and influence members of the commission on their recommendation to council. So again, that's why we wanted to put that clarification in there, because the current bylaw isn't very clear about that.
Okay.
Councilor Woodward.
I think one of the things that I've heard that's challenged this committee is that people have a misunderstanding that when the group gives recommendations to council, that council should basically adopt it. And I think the group works hard to try to figure this out, but it is an advisory role, and I'm saying role of the commission, and I don't see that in there saying something like opinions of this committee may or may not be implemented by council. Because I think that's an important piece, because people need to recognize that they are not setting policy in that, and that's for people who are elected by the public. And I think it's a very important definition to have in here.
I've chaired this not as a counselor. I was the chair of the APC I was on it for the 6 years that you can be on it, and I think I chaired it for either 2 or 3 years. And one of the first things I always explain to people when they came on, that it is advisory, and that's why it's the Advisory Planning Commission.
No.
That's why it's the APC, not the PC.
It's not
defined in there, but it's in the, it's even in the title.
I know, but I think this is what I've heard that's been a stumbling block.
Yeah, and I think, and you're right, and that's why I think as the chair, and I think it's always important that when a new member comes on, that the time is spent, because you do get a big package of what it is, and usually I know that when I was on the APC, everybody that was on it also got a copy of the OCP, and so that they understood. I mean, it's not, it's a heady committee in terms of the fact that you can put a lot into it and maybe not get out what you were thinking you might get out. But there is a need to have that sort of basic, and so there's some pretty heavy documents that you probably should have looked at, as becoming a member of it. And then I think there is sometimes that feeling of, wow, I did all that work, for those that do that when they join that committee. And then, the irregularity of meeting and other things becomes problematic. But I think it's pretty clear, but there's nothing to say that you can't have another statement in there that really clarifies that it's an advisory. It's advisory. It's in the title.
I know, I think people think that they're being advised for their expertise, and that we would, like staff, we would be like, okay, the advisory committee said this, but they're not our staff, right? And so there's a level of thank you very much. That's great insight, but we're going to go in a different direction.
So,
Our staff as well.
Yeah, I think that's, the mayor made a good point about the chair of the committee, and it might be something where staff can, remind the chair that, hey, let's, at the beginning of the meetings, let's make it abundantly clear that this is an advisory role. It isn't, like, in the whereas, it says that, deems it, the city council of the city of Nelson deems it advantageous to receive recommendations from an APC. And then in part 4, it also says the role of the commission is to advise council on matters respecting land use, so on and so forth. So I think probably, it's fairly well listed out in there, and I can see I can imagine the historic challenges when people, might be upset because their recommendation wasn't necessarily taken for what could be a host of other reasons. So maybe we can meet, I think, what your concern, I think that we can address that through the work with the chair and at those meetings, because our staff are there and are able to remind everybody of the role of the group, which is typically when you have these quasi ad hoc groups too, right? It's not like they're meeting every month and everybody's really familiar and remembers exactly what their role is. It's good practice in those groups anyways to say, and just so everybody remembers why we're here, this is what we're here to do, provide, some consideration and thought, and provide that recommendation to council. Council can do what they want with it at that point, because they will have, potentially a broader perspective on things for a whole host of different reasons. Okay. Does that sound reasonable?
Yep.
Okay.
And after sitting here for maybe far too long, I'm just gonna just try to calculate in my head how long I've been here in terms of experiences, that I would have to say that there's been very few times, and I think to this point about the fact that somebody might not like the fact that we didn't go with the decision, or they had a different decision when they were at the APC, is that I can't remember that many. I could probably maybe count on one hand the times where we took a direction completely different than what the APC recommendation was.
Okay.
Because sometimes that recommendation, because there's other factors that come in, it could have been a fire issue or something that group is less familiar with, that sort of, you can't ever say that word Trump anymore. Like, can somebody give me a new, where's the thesaurus? I need a new word for Trump, but, that something else made it so that it couldn't be.
You can musk it.
I can musk it? Yeah. Anyhow, but you understand what I'm saying, Councillor Woodward? I just can't remember in all of the years that many times where we didn't, where in the backgrounder and they had gone for it, that we went completely off in a different direction as the council. Okay. Councillor Tate.
I know we get tired of philosophical discussions, and Councillor Woodward will tell me later that I talk too long. But it does bring up a good point of how difficult it is when being faced with a proposal from a proponent and all of the good reasons to do a particular thing, how difficult it is to come to be able to look at it critically and find the other sides. And that is one deficit that I sometimes see, is that it's a lot more, because the proposals come from proponents, it's a lot more challenging to find the other side or the possible counterpoints. One good thing of the APC is that 9 people who are having a conversation about it first and are bringing up possible counterpoints and points and then making recommendations. So in some ways it's a think tank before it gets to us. But I acknowledge that the challenge of sitting at this table with proposals in front of us from proponents. Yeah.
Okay, so seeing nobody's hand up, we have 4 recommendations to try to get through here. Does somebody want to put the first one on the floor? Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Pinero. Oh, is that how that works? Okay, I'm going to follow that hand signal. Very good. Okay, Councillor Woodward.
She doesn't see your hand.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Advisory Planning Commission Bylaw number 3621, 2025 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Okay, so I think we've had our questions answered, so I'm going to ask, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Moving on to number 2. Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Payne.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Advisory Planning Commission Bylaw number 3621, 2025 be read a third time by title only.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3 regarding the Board of Variance. can put it on the table. Okay, moved by Councilor Pinero, seconded by Councilor Woodward. Councilor Pinero.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Board of Variance Bylaw number 3622, 2025 be read a first and second time by title only.
Okay. Okay, so we talked a lot about the APC. Does everybody know what the Board of Variance is? Okay, everybody's comfortable with that. So on that case, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. And going on to recommendation number 4, moved by Councilor Pinero, seconded by Councilor Woodward. Councilor Pinero.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Board of Variance Bylaw number 3622, 2025 be read a third time by title only.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor and opposed, and that carries. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
Moving on to bylaw 12D. Thank you again for staff. Thank you. Have a good evening. Seniors parking permit, introduction for the first 3 readings. Due to the timing of the increase of parking meter fees in early 2024, the senior parking permits were postponed as some 2024 annual passes had been purchased by residents. The fees and charges amendment, traffic and parking meter fee, bylaw number 3624, 2025 is presented for the first 3 readings to reflect a consistent increase. So councillors, there's the backgrounder is there. I think if you have any questions that, Chris, you'll be able to answer any of the financial questions if you've got any. Oh, sorry.
Unless you have questions.
Well, come on up. You might as well come up to the hot seat. Why not? Join in. You've been sitting back there. Sorry, you're behind Bill. I can barely see you.
I sat there.
Yeah.
I scooped it too fast.
Okay, so basically there's a request here for an increase from $90 to $144. There's a backgrounder there. And so would anybody like to move the first recommendation and then we can have some discussion?
I can move.
Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Tate.
That the Corporation and City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment, Traffic and Parking Meter Fees Bylaw number 3624, 2025 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Okay, so councillors, any discussion? Okay, starting with Councillor Payne and then followed by Councillor Pinero.
I do have a question. I'm sorry I didn't ask it earlier. It just came to my attention right before the meeting. But when was the last time that this parking pass was increased to the $90?
2017.
Back in 2017. And,
2017. So the same time we did the last, no, there was a, okay,
Correct.
I thought there was an increase in between. So it was increased in 2017 from $20,
$30.
$30 to $90.
Correct.
How did the senior community feel about that? That's a separate question you don't have to answer.
Well, I guess I was the only person that was at the table at that time.
Yes.
So there was some concern. What we did, if I recall correctly, now who? Jesus, really getting slim on who I can look around the room to see. I think what we looked at, because a way to measure it, because there can be 1 or 2 people that are very vocal. It wasn't like we had a big petition or anything, but what we did is we looked at whether or not there was less purchases of seniors parking passes, and as a result of it going up. And I think it was pretty equivocal in terms of maybe there was a few less, but is that a few less because people had, sorry to say, passed away, or a few less because they could no longer afford the parking pass? So there was lots of discussion that went on about, well, the increase, if you can afford a car, the increase probably would be like, there was lots of pro and back and forth, but that was about one thing to look at was, so we know that there's 250 seniors parking passes currently. If it turned out that they only sold 100, perhaps that would be a reflection. I mean, and that's not even a good gauge. I mean, statistically, that's probably not the way, but I do believe that is how we looked at it the last time, and there wasn't really a dip in the number of parking passes that were being requested in that year of the increase. So that's my, brain fog. It's 2017, that's now, 8 years ago. But I do recall that that's kind of how we looked at how we would gauge the response. Does that seem like it's? Councillor Woodward.
I think something that really popped out for me here was the cost savings line here with the increase of $144 per year. This is in the agenda package. For a senior's parking pass will pay itself off if a senior spends on an average of 1.5 hours per week. So people, I imagine, would be parking downtown far more than 1.5 hours per week if they're getting a parking pass. So it still covers itself. And I think we have to acknowledge that the cost of maintaining the downtown core and the sidewalks and all the infrastructure has increased hugely in the last 5 years. I think construction costs have gone up 50% in the last 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was the fee increase that we built in was based on that exact, so I think it was more like that 60%. So we looked at what has the cost of paving and, that non-residential construction, what's that done? And that's what we need to put into our capital reserves for replacing that infrastructure. So that's what the fee increase was based on, was that kind of inflationary piece.
Yeah.
And the math that you were just referring to is, worked before that 1.5 hours a week, and now with the rate increase, they would still get that same 1.5 hours a week. And there's a convenience factor too, of course, that built into that. So even if you weren't parking 1.5 hours a week, you might still think it's worthwhile just for the convenience side of things, but yeah.
Okay.
And my apologies, Council. I went to you, Councilor, before Panero, but I answered Councilor Payne's question, but I don't know whether I answered it. Did you have any further question?
I do have a further question, but I'll come back after, if that's all
Councilor
right.
Panero, then?
Yeah, I struggle to frame this as a question, really, but it's not a question. It's an observation that I wouldn't, I don't speak for seniors, not being one, but I am aware that this is a population in our town that faces, sort of by definition, costs are going up for us, and they're going up for everybody else as well. And seniors are, at least potentially some of the people that are least able to afford these things, because a lot of people are on a fixed income. And so costs have gone up, and so have our parking rates by a significant amount, and for the significant majority of the population. And for me, I feel like when we have an opportunity to make it easier on a population that does potentially struggle with things like inflation and groceries and rents and things that younger people can find ways to deal with in ways that older people maybe can't. I think it sort of shows a bit of leadership to make it easier for those people. I don't really understand why we need to, across the board, change it just because we change meter rates. Why do we have to change this a senior's pass? They're two different things. It serves a very specific segment of the population. There's not going to magically be radically more seniors. You can't fake it. You're either a senior or you're not. So this isn't gonna, there's not gonna be people like taking advantage of it. People that need it will use it, and they'll save a significant amount of money. And I don't really see the issue with that. I think that's a good thing. I wouldn't, I don't think I'm planning on supporting this one. I think it still costs money to get a senior's pass. I think it's $90 and that's a lot of money to some people. And they still need to come downtown and they still need to get their groceries and they're still a valuable and vibrant part of the community. And I think that keeping it the way it is just doubles down on that and makes it even more so. So I urge people to, if this is something like, if this is a hit, I think it's a hit we can afford, and it has the potential to make life just a little bit easier for a lot of people. So, yeah, not a question by any means.
Council, I'm going to go to Councillor Lockenberg.
Yeah.
My understanding is that I had to Google it just to confirm, but pensions are indexed
Yes.
somewhat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
both CPP and OAS are indexed,
Right.
as are most, if you happen to have a government pension plan. I don't know of, there's a few private pension plans that don't index, but all plans
Right.
index.
So we've held the parking passes static for 8 years without any increase, and in that time pensions have been increasing. So if we had just sort of kept things increasing at inflation, which is difficult for parking given that it's if you want to have it somewhat reflect meters, it tends to go in jumps, and we don't want to necessarily redo the bylaw, but maybe that's what we do. We just say that the seniors parking pass is indexed. My concern is that this infrastructure has to be paid, and young people are bearing increasingly the burden of supporting society. And if I were to look across society, who's least able to support, the cost of supporting our community, young people at this point feel like those least able. So, and it can switch. It can, young people may over time have it easier through all this work we're doing, but right now it just seems to me that they're overwhelmingly carrying the cost of supporting society. And as the demographic shifts increasingly to seniors, that burden just keeps landing more and more heavy on young people. So while I appreciate Councillor Pinero's point for sure, it seems to me like we all have to do a little bit, including seniors. And if they hadn't been receiving that increasing index on their pension, then I would definitely agree, because they don't have any additional room. But every year they get a little bit more room. And so it seems to me we should. Anyways, that's my thought.
Councillor Payne.
So I have a couple of things around this. I'll get to the equity one secondly, because I support the thought that Councillor Pinero has brought forward. But the way I see it, I see a parking spot as a piece of real estate in our town that needs to be maintained, and I understand that. So we know that every day we have a huge population that comes from outside of our borders into our town, outside of the city boundary, into our town, and uses those facilities. So the maintenance and the infrastructure, keeping all those things going through parking rates, are somewhat removed from the tax burden of property owners. The seniors that are buying these parking passes all need to live within the city of Nelson, do they not? Yeah. So they are, to some degree.
Is that true?
You just have to live within city limits, yes.
Yeah.
And you
within the
proved
city
that
limits.
at the time? Because I've heard
Yeah.
from a few people who complained about not having parking passes who don't live in the city. Like
Yeah, if you
when they
don't
used
live in
to.
the city, you can't get
Okay,
Yeah, we asked for.
you asked for proof
documentation.
of, okay, thank you.
Yeah, so my feeling is that those individuals who live within the city are, through their taxes, paying a proportion of what that real estate and maintenance is. The second part of my thought is, so I think that's an equity. There is already a contribution from them as taxpayers or even as renters through their tax-paying landlords. The other part is that having worked for Kootenai Seniors, in 2014, I don't know how this passed or how it played out, but Nelson either applied or became an age-friendly city or had an age-friendly initiative. Is this anything that rings any bells? And one of the components of an age-friendly city is around supporting seniors in transportation. So as much as I understand the indexing of pensions, I can assure you that anyone living on solely a government pension is going to be sorely pressed to contribute that 2 to 4% that I don't even think they've gone up to 4% indexing around those increases to handle an increase like this. Maybe going forward, that's something that we could look at, but considering the somewhat insignificant amount that we're talking about, I do believe this is letting seniors know that there is a value to their often hugely huge contributions to volunteering in our community with the time that they are now not necessarily contributing to their work life unless they can no longer afford to be completely retired and need to be out there still working past 65. So those are just sort of the two sides that came to me, is that this is for City of Nelson residents.
Councilor Panero.
Just as sort of a follow-up thought and to kind of riff off of that a little bit, like, obviously, all seniors are not the same, and all pensions are not the same, and whether they're indexed or not, if you're on sort of a minimum pension, like if you've been self-employed most of your life, and you get literally nothing. Like it's very, very minimal, and so whether it goes up, it's indexed to being absolutely the minimum that anybody can live on. And so, you know, like I have parents that are on this sort of thing, and they're making, you know, roughly less than $1,000 a month, and that's what they live on. So to think that, you know, yes, there are people on pensions that can afford this, and I hazard a guess that those people probably just park. If you're on a government, if you were an MLA or something, and you're just going to park downtown, I doubt you even have a seniors pass, and so I think this infrastructure gets paid for either way. The flexibility that younger people have is not necessarily to pay for it, because young people are poor and struggling as well. The flexibility that younger people have, I can only speak for myself, but like I just don't drive downtown anymore because I have legs and I can walk. That's a flexibility that, you know, some people with mobility issues don't have. So it's economic flexibility, but it's also the flexibility of just, you know, being in an older body and not having those options. I think those parking spots get filled, man, by people, by visitors, by people that can afford to pay for them, by what, you know, I think that infrastructure is being paid for. I think this is an opportunity to give people that need it a break, and I don't feel like it will be taken advantage of. I think it will be a break that's used and appreciated by the people that need it. So
Can I ask sorry, I just wanted to ask a question about, does anybody know, so when you get a parking pass, can you then just park anywhere?
Not Baker Street.
Or
is
seniors
it-
parking pass, you
Senior
can't park
parking
on
pass,
Baker.
you can't park on Baker, right?
Not on
Okay.
Baker Street, and you have to follow the guidelines, like the hour time limits on meters.
Yeah, it's still a 2 hour, yeah.
The 2, the
Okay,
4,
sorry.
the whatever,
I just,
yeah.
these things all just decided to turn off, so I just had to ask that question in my head, so. I'm back over to Councillor Tate.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment on the savings part of it. The equity part of it, I'm still ruminating on. So this, you make the money back at 1.5 hours per week. So if you had to pay that, so suppose you don't have a parking pass and you have to pay that, for 1.5 hours a week, it's going to be $234. So the pass itself is already an offering of savings, and that symbol of valuing the input of seniors, because we don't have that offer to young people. We don't have that offer of savings to other groups, and age, is not a determinant of need. So if we're going to have a needs-based parking pass system, that's going to be something we're going to have to ask Amy to put 150 hours into, because that's I mean, this is a nice symbol. This is a nice gesture for, and I think a lot of our seniors-based policies are really fabulous gestures to people who've lived and worked and volunteered in our community for 65 years. I was going to say a million years.
Not quite that.
Yeah, 65 years. So this is a gesture and an offer of savings already based on that. And then it's always going to be addition to that, because folks would use it likely more than an hour and a half per week every week. So, and we don't offer that savings to any other groups, particularly based on age, which is not a determinant of need. So I'm just rolling that around in my head, and I just wanted to say I really love having conversations with you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, so, and just to go back to that, to talk about previous discussion, is that there was a couple of very strong voices the last time we went through this that said that having seniors parking pass is not a common occurrence through communities, and that there was actually quite, and it came, I think it came very close, that it was almost eliminated in a vote, was just not have it. If the controversy was going to be trying to increase it a bit, then maybe to eliminate any controversy is just to eliminate the seniors parking pass. So that's just past history.
Sounds
I'm
like a
not
Solomon
making
to me.
a past history. So I think I'm going to Councillor Woodward, and then I'm going to Councillor Lockenberg.
I just also, riffing on this, is that, I'm not saying, again, it's very challenging to sort of put seniors in a block and say, they're an in-need group, because I would say, yeah, there are, like as Councillor Lockenberg said, and as Councillor Tate said, that there is need throughout the age spectrum, but seniors, the boomers own most of the housing. They have pensions from times when pensions actually had real value. I mean, I'm not trying to be callous here, but I think that there are, and I've worked with many seniors, and many seniors have a lot of funds too. And they participate in our society in many different ways. But I just feel like that I really appreciate what Councillor Tate is saying, is that if it is an age-based thing, that it doesn't work. I mean, we should be giving breaks to all kinds of people, students, or people just fresh out of high school, or you know what I mean? Like, because there's struggle everywhere. So I just feel like I look at this policy and I'm like, we're just tracking along with the cost of what it takes to run a city, and we all pay our taxes in the city, in the RD, provincially, federally. We all pay into a giant pot to make it all go. And I feel like this is just another contribution so that we can have a working city for the long haul. So, thank you.
Councillor Lockenberg.
Well said. I think the this discussion's really interesting and helpful for me. I would say I definitely vote in favor of continuing the seniors parking pass. And I think each of us are saying that we value our seniors. We want to offer them this benefit. We really want to, we want them to continue to be part of our vibrant downtown, and this is the way that taxpayers are offering our seniors this additional subsidy to really acknowledge their worth and their value to us as a community. And I think that what all we're doing is the same thing that's happening everywhere. We're trying to find that balance between young people who are increasingly carrying the burden of supporting society. And as Councillor Tate so eloquently said, recognizing that we can't offer benefits everywhere, but we'll do what we can. And here we're doing this for seniors, and I think we should continue to offer this benefit to seniors. And I think that this is a really nice balance. And so I'm definitely in favor of this parking pass.
Councillor Payne.
So I'm just curious about the definition of young people that you're using. So is that anyone under 65?
Well, I would say.
Saying, I'm trying to understand.
Okay, how about this? Anybody who doesn't own a home is
a young person?
No.
No, is it not? Yeah.
It's what I'm saying is that these classes and categories. If we're going to draw a category of seniors, recognizing the incredible diversity that exists within that population. There's homeowners, there's not homeowners. They have means. Many do, maybe most, as Councillor Woodward said. Some don't. If you looked at young people, the overall as a demographic, the burdens that they're carrying in terms of the cost of education, the cost of housing, the difficulties in finding that balance ultimately to get onto the ladder of prosperity has never been more difficult than it is now for young people. So while we're not going to try to right every wrong here and try to deliver benefits to everybody, at the very least, we can continue to offer this benefit to seniors while acknowledging that a moderate increase over time in line with inflation is just an acknowledgement that we don't want to put an increasing burden on young people. Because if we just held it static, we're essentially saying young people and the rest of society, you need to pay more to support, the subsidy that this program offers. And I'm just saying, let's not just add burden onto young people. Let's continue to offer this benefit to seniors and maintain that balance as it's been for 20 years.
You want to do it again? Counselor, I'm running out of paper here, guys.
I agree that age is not a determinant of need whatsoever. And judging by the numbers here, 250 people bought a senior parking permit last year. I would hazard a guess that there's more than 250 seniors that live in Nelson. So people that don't need it aren't using it.
Or people that can't
Presumably,
afford it.
Right?
People that can't afford a car.
People that can't afford $90.
It's imperfect, and to say that young people need a break too, I agree. There was debate around the table whether we should increase parking rates across the board, and there was people that were against that as well, because it's a burden on everyone, right? Things need to be paid for, that's clear. They're being paid for. I think the thing is with the increases across the board is that they really are across the board, and when it's a small increase, I don't know that maybe like in the last 5 or 10 years is the first time I've ever heard of like a 60% increase being a small increase. That's not a small increase. It's a significant increase. And I know that it's a small thing like parking, and that the dollar amount isn't gigantic, but as a percentage across the board, if everything goes up 60%, people are going to hurt for that at varying degrees of hurt, because everybody's at a completely different economic reality. I just think this is an opportunity where we don't have to. And because there's a small amount of people involved, because that 250 people or whatever is it's a small slice, and it's a small thing. It's not, it's a parking meter. It's not a fundamental thing for the running of the town at those numbers. It's, perhaps it's a bit like a token or a bit of a performance.
Gesture.
It's a gesture, but it's a meaningful gesture for those people involved. And 60% isn't small. 60% is significant. And if those trends are significant, like everything is going up at those rates, it seems. And that's the impression that I have is, I don't know, as somebody who traditionally has thought about things like where my next paycheck is coming from and whether I have enough money in the bank for this and that. And, you know, that has been my reality for most of my life. And so I think about these things. And if everything goes up 60%, I know that I'm not doing well. So again, yes, it's not perfect. Age is not a determining factor, but within that imperfection, this gives people an opportunity to just have one thing that doesn't go up exponentially out of the many, many other things that will and have no choice but to go up. And some of those things we have control over, some of the things we don't, but it's just, I don't think we need to do this. And so I urge us to not.
Okay, councillors, I think you've all had opportunity to speak to the issue at hand. So I'm going to hazard, it was moved and seconded. And so in regards to recommendation number 1, all those in favor and opposed, and that carries. Opposition, do you wish to be recorded?
I do.
Yes, please.
Okay. And moving on to recommendation number 2. And if I could have a mover, moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Tate.
That the Corporation of City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment, Traffic and Parking Meter Fees Bylaw number 3624/2025 be read a third time by title only.
Okay, so we've had a lengthy discussion. All those in favor and opposed and wish to be recorded? Thank you. Okay. Okay, moving on. We are at item number 14. So reports. So we have summary of items here, information items. We have from finance, the accounts payable listing, and from development services, the development permit statistics for the month of December. Does anybody have a need to pull one of these out separately, or can we, can I ask for a motion to receive information for 1 and 2?
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor, and that carries. Thank you. And then we have, oh, it was so funny when I read these. Because we go back to September the 10th, and there's been about 15 decisions made since then, but information items. So we do have from it was still called the Nelson and Area Economic Development Partnership, now GNED. There are minutes from the September 10th meeting. And so I'll ask if there's someone that would like to move those, unless there's an issue there. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor, and that carries. Thank you, Council. There was no notice of motions. There was no late items. So we are at item number 17, a resolution to adjourn.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Can I ask, because we had a workshop on parking this last year, is parking another thing that comes up? Does it come up yearly where we talk about that parking master plan strategy? Or that's not yearly? I'm just curious. I'm not.
We haven't, I mean, I just know that because I just had a question. Somebody's asked me for an interview about parking.
Oh, okay.
But we have the parking strategy there.
Yes.
The parking strategy is actually one of those policies that's kind of somewhat embedded in the OCP. We haven't taken that parking strategy that we had the revision of in 2021. Do I have
Yeah,
it
not
right?
long ago. I was just curious
Yeah,
because it has like 55 recommendations.
Yeah,
or
and
whatever.
we haven't implemented all those recommendations. Again, it could be one of those things that, and then I'll let the city manager, because he'll know where it fits in the scheme of things. That we could have further discussion about implementing some more of those recommendations.
Yeah, I'm always curious about the parking along Lakeside Drive. That's.
Oh, about, yeah, whether or not yeah, so.
I was just curious.
Oh, okay.
It's one of the recommendations is looking for those other opportunities.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah, basically, we have a number of plans, each department, based on your priorities, are going to bring forward, recommendations in those plans to move those things forward. So we're always looking for, if council thinks some of these things are more important than others, then let us know and we can adjust work plans. That is a good one. We part of that is us rolling out the mobile pay program so that we can, we don't have to meter all these places that we want to expand parking in. Can definitely look at, relook at that one. And I think there's some discussion in there about,
Equity.
yeah, and also when should we expand when we charge for parking? Should we look at Sundays? Should we look more into the evenings, et cetera? So.
Oh, interesting. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's a number of things that can be considered, and I think as we roll out more of the app usage, I would expect that probably in a quarterly report, we will also hear back, because we've kind of been monitoring how that's been going. I know that when we do the quarterly summaries, we've often asked in our discussions, so what's happening, how's that working, how full is the parkade, because that's when we ask those revenue generating questions as well. So we get this reported back to us in a number of ways, but we can definitely add it to, if that's the direction we want to go to, as the community expands and looking at more options for parking, we can definitely have that brought back along the way. Because I do look at the same plot of land there and think, wow, there's a lot of free parking. You drive down there and you think like, whoa, even if that was like a daily
$5 a
rate
day.
there,
Yeah.
if that was the $8
It
rate
adds
there,
up.
there's almost as many people parked there as we can shove into the parkade, I think. So,
And so if I could just add, we'll get an update on where we're at with the pay by phone on Friday, because finance and parking has a slot in the agenda for Friday. So we'll kind of give you an indication of where the rollout is for pay by phone. And yes, that would sort of be like phase 3, I guess. We have the parkade, we've got sort of the meters, and then looking at those other areas like down by the runway and things like that.
Cool. Thanks.
so I think we're gonna see those come back.
Thanks.
That was just
I just like, well, no, I just started thinking okay, are we getting on with trying the, the usual one where I can never get anybody's hands put up? It's like, so if I could have a motion to adjourn, as long as nobody has any other comments that we should be capturing while we're still in session. Okay, so motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Panero. All those in favor of adjournment, thank you very much, everybody. It was a really heady agenda, and 8:50.